Welcome to Mystic Realms Recap. Please like, share, and subscribe. Enjoy today's episode.
Ikari Lamire. The king tilted his head as he heard the anger in her voice. Mum, restraint. Een warned softly. Taking a deep breath, Shiro nodded her head slightly and calmed herself. So have you heard of him? Shiro asked. No, I don't believe I have. As for the class, I haven't heard of anyone possessing it either. Why do you want to find the person with that class? He replied. I do. But since you don't know, forget about it. Let's continue our discussion about Lisa's identity. Shiro smiled as if nothing had happened. However, Lysandra could clearly feel the hatred from a moment ago as her back stiffened slightly from being so close to her. Holy sh*t, who the hell pissed Teach off? I pray that you may stay alive so that she can vent her anger. Lysandra thought to herself. She wished that Shiro could vent herself so that her mind wouldn't be so occupied with killing, but instead raising her and Een nicely. Wait, how did she trail off so much? Right. Anyways, so where should I start? The king muttered. How about the reason why she's the incarnation? He smiled. You see, when Lysandra was born, me and her real mother had taken her to the divine temple to get her blessed. Little did we know that a strand of divine essence would enter her body. At that time, we heard a voice saying that she would become her incarnation. The king shook his head. Wait, is that all? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Why, what else do you want to hear? So, you're saying you went to the temple and the goddess chose Lysandra? Indeed. The king nodded. PFT, I'm joking. Of course, she said more. The king chuckled. Oi. Shiro glared. Anyways. She said that once the time is right, Lysandra will inherit all of her power and become the next light goddess. Hearing what he said, Shiro had some conflict on in her mind. Is that all? Shiro asked with suspicion. That was all we were told. The king nodded. Looking at his expression, she knew that he wasn't lying. But from her estimates, if the light goddess could make someone her incarnate, surely she could reserve. You've got to be kidding me. Shiro muttered as a theory popped into her mind. Glancing at Lysandra for a moment, Shiro looked back at the king and frowned slightly. For someone like the light goddess to give up her powers instead of recuperating is pure bullshit*t, she thought to herself. From her estimations, she guessed that the biggest reason for Lysandra having the class of incarnation was for her to become the vessel for the light goddess. Oi king, do you know where the divine temple, or whatever is? Shiro asked with a serious face. Yes, I do. Why do you ask? The king replied, ignoring the fact that she had just addressed him with oi. That's settled then. We're heading out to the mainland. Shiro nodded her head and stood up without any room for discussion. Both Een and Lysandra had been used to this, so they followed behind. Huh? What? Wait, hold on. The king cried out in shock as he realized a nanotech wire was threaded around his waist. Gah! He cried out, feeling a tug from the wire. Bang. His table was knocked aside, and he was dragged away. Bully! He cursed in his mind since there was nothing he could do. Giving some simple orders to the soldiers in regard to what they should do while they were gone, Shiro hopped on Yin's back with Lysandra and the king. Show us the way. Shiro smiled at the king. Grumbling to himself for a short while, he started to guide them towards the mainland. The mainland was quite far from the kingdom, since it should take 3 days for them to arrive. That was only if they went full speed without caring about food or sleep. Otherwise, it would take them roughly a week. On the way there, they would stop to get something to eat and rest. Finally, after a week's worth of traveling, they arrived at the main continent. Whistle. Well, ain't this impressive? Shiro smiled lightly while looking at the giant temple in front of her. Crafted from a white material with gold highlights, its size was akin to a mountain. Clouds wrapped around it, making it seem like a holy palace that descended from the heavens. We'll have to walk from here. There are restrictions put in place around the fallen god corpse and the temple, he said as Shiro nodded. Gesturing for Een to fly down, they started to walk towards the temple. Both Een and Lysandra walked near Shiro since they were a little nervous. Darling, why don't you walk near me? The king pouted a little seeing his darling daughter walking near Shiro instead of him. Teach is more dependable. Lysandra smiled playfully. Crack. Een, did you hear that? Shiro asked, tilting her head up. Hear what, Mom? The old man's heart just shattered. Shiro grinned before glancing at the king. Unlike before, his face was depressed and lifeless. Looking at him, Shiro couldn't help but smile and shake her head. Lisa, go comfort your father a little. Shiro chuckled. HN, fine. Lysandra nodded. Hopping over to her father, she helped him stand up straight. Stop being so depressing already. You're going to embarrass me, Lysandra said, trying to pacify her father. Ignoring the duo, Shiro kept her eyes on the temple in front of them. Ever since they had stepped foot on the ground here, she had already felt the aura similar to the one the hero possessed. Narrowing her eyes, she knew that this was most likely the same goddess. 10th Protector of the Defense Nodes requests entry into the Divine Temple. The king shouted out as the ground started to rumble. A golden barrier fluctuated for a moment before opening up slightly as to let them in. Come, the king said seriously. Following behind him, they realized that most of the guards inside the temple were all automated golems rather than humans. Moreover, each of them were level 75. Surprised? The king smiled. A little, Shiro replied as she rubbed her nose. She was surprised at how poor the defenses were. For something that was to stop a demon king from reaching tier 7, this was too shabby. The corpse of the goddess is beneath us. We'll be heading down now. Guiding the trio down, the king walked with a serious expression. For some reason, he felt a little uneasy in his heart. They arrived on the bottommost layer and were greeted by a set of giant doors that were engraved with countless runes. The king was about to unlock the door when Shiro stepped forwards. She recognized these runes since they were the most common runes from her world. Snapping her fingers, she created her own runes which slowly melded into a key. Celestial key. How do you have one? The king cried out in shock. What celestial key? This is just a simple rune key. Shiro rolled her eyes before pushing out with her hand. Looking at Shiro with his eyes wide open, he didn't know how Shiro had the key to the door, especially since the keys had been distributed by the goddess and were bound to their soul. Bang. Slamming the door open, Shiro walked in without any fear. The most that the goddess could do was kill her in this quest. The room was rather empty since all that it contained was a single crystal coffin that had the body of a girl inside. However, when Shiro saw the face of the girl, her killing intent surged outwards like a malevolent demon. The face of the goddess reminded her too much of the light hero that she almost couldn't control herself from bombarding the crystal. Walking towards it slowly, each step of hers froze the ground beneath her. The king, Een and Lysandra weren't able to enter the room due to her killing intent being so oppressive and could only watch. Be careful, Mom, Een warned. Don't worry, Shiro replied. Walking closer to the crystal, she could see several characters etched onto the surface. A single glance allowed her to realize that it was the language used in Arya. Not only that, but it also told her a way to communicate with the residue soul essence of the goddess. How interesting. Shiro smiled before pressing her palm onto the surface of the crystal. Looking at her actions, the king paled. Stop. You can't. The goddess said that you can only use this in times of need. The king cried out. However, before he could continue, Shiro sent him a glare which rooted him in place. Biting his lip, he tried to calm himself down, but the sheer amount of killing intent that Shiro was releasing restrained him from doing anything. Of course, she was careful as to not affect Een or Lysandra. Divine light elements started to fill the room before condensing into a hollow image of the woman inside the crystal. Speak, what is the emergency? She said coldly. The emergency is a question. Do you know Ikari Lamire? Shiro asked as her eyes narrowed. The goddess paused as she glanced at Shiro. How do you know my divine father's name? She asked curiously. Divine father? So the guy reached tier 8 and had a daughter, huh? Ha ha. Shiro laughed out. Meanwhile, Een stood there with her eyes wide open. Holy F *CK? Mum wanted to kill a god, she thought. You know divine father? I do. I came from the same world as him. Shiro grinned. Impossible. The goddess denied. Ho, what do you mean impossible? Other than divine father, no one else has reached tier 7. I can say for certain that unless you're a tier 7 demigod, you won't be able to cross worlds. The closest person to tier 7 was a girl who died. She was quite talented, but divine father naturally outshined her. He was the first in his world to have ever reached tier 6, with her following shortly after him. She shook her head. So he lied to his daughter about his achievements? Typical. That being said, tier 7 is needed to cross worlds, huh? Interesting. Unfortunately, I don't think I can get my revenge anytime soon since the bastard's a tier 8 god. Shiro thought. Also, I want to ask you this. Why is Lysandra your incarnation? Emin? Well, I was heavily injured and could only choose death or pass down my powers. Naturally, I chose the most suitable. The goddess replied. However, Shiro didn't believe one word. She could tell that it was a lie. What if I gave her a different class? During one of the expeditions in the ruins, we found a core that will give her the double S class Iona hero. Since the class is a hero, it would have extra benefits to help kill the Demon King along with propelling her level to 100. Shiro lied. You can't. The goddess cried out in shock. You can't since the class I gave her is triple S class. Just give it some time, and its power would naturally show itself. The risk is higher if you downgrade her class. She tried to persuade Shiro. If she changes the class now, her preparations would be foiled. But time is urgent. Shiro frowned as if she was truly concerned. How about I give you some items, or bless your weapons? That should help you against the tide for now. She offered urgently in order to stop them from destroying her plans. All right. The goddess waved her hand as she brought everyone into the room. However, when she saw Een, she was rather surprised at her class. A dark star calamity phoenix. She cried out. What? Never seen someone as special as this baby before. Een puffed up her chest. The goddess stayed silent. From what she could tell, her IQ was clearly lacking a little, and the best thing to do was to just ignore. Flexing her fingers, several items appeared in the air. Each one radiated divine might, as Shiro didn't even check them before storing them into her bracelet. Amen. Lisa, show her your weapon. Shiro gestured to Lysandra since the goddess did offer to bless the weapons. Nodding her head, Lysandra presented her weapon and the goddess bathed it in a holy light. All right, that's everything. Shiro smiled before turning away. Grabbing both Een and Lysandra, reached the door and was about to leave. The F***CK? They all thought seeing her decisive actions. Oh, but before I forget, tell your father to prepare himself. An old friend by the name of Nitri Vespera is back. Shiro smiled ambiguously before leaving with the Een and Lysandra in tow. The king was confused before quickly bowing to the goddess and left to catch up with Shiro. Nitri Vespera? The goddess muttered in confusion. She decided that it was better to ask her father once she was done with everything. Meanwhile, Mom, who's Nitri Vespera? Een asked curiously. It's my old name. Shiro smiled. Wait, old? Also, teach. What do you mean by you come from the same world as the goddess's father? Lysandra asked in confusion. The king was also intrigued by this. Long story. Shiro shrugged. Also, Lysandra, I need to warn you about something. Shiro continued as her playfulness disappeared. What does it teach? The goddess is planning to make you the next light goddess, but it's not what you think it is. Shiro frowned. What do you mean? Lysandra asked curiously. I'll tell you later. But right now, let's go back and see what we have. Shiro shook her head. She wasn't going to tamper with Lysandra's class just yet. Plus, she had just managed to acquire more rewards from the quests, so she was indeed curious as to what they were. Of course, this was just an excuse to distract her from the killing intent that was bubbling up inside her. Sitting on the back of Een, they made their way back to the kingdom. During this, Shiro checked the loot that she managed to receive from the goddess. Within her bracelet, there was a total of 5 items. 2 materials, 1 pill, 1 bag, and 1 jade core. Out of the 5 items, the bag aroused her interest the most. From her guesses, it should be either the wish bag or the emergency bag. Emergency bag, purple, gives whoever opened this an item that they need. Looking at the bag, Shiro's eyes glistened with joy. Regardless of what this bag gave her, it was definitely going to assist her. Putting the bag into her pocket, she was going to open it once she checked the other items. Divine Metal Red. A rare metal that is used to infuse divine essence into a weapon of choice. Can only be used on weapons that has reached the red grade. Heavenly Runes. Red, 2 halves uses. A set of runes that will merge with a weapon or armor in order to boost its prowess. Can only be used on a weapon or armor that has reached the red grade. Looking at the two materials, Shiro instantly understood that the goddess had wanted her to give these to Lysandra. By doing this, not only will she help Lysandra win the war, but also boost her future vessel. Unfortunately for her, she doesn't know that I have a weapon that is bounded to me and can grow. Shiro thought with a smile. She was going to be a little selfish and keep them to herself. System, store these two into final rewards chest. Shiro commanded in her head. Storing failed. As pivotal items of the quest, user cannot store them away unless they complete the quest without using them. Frowning at the system message, Shiro shook her head. Seems like it wouldn't be that easy. Setting the two aside in her bracelet, she took out the pill. Celestial Pill, Orange. A medicine that will heal the user to max health as long as they haven't died. Not only that, it will also embed them with the passive Celestial Might for a short moment of time. This would probably be good against the Demon King, Shiro thought to herself. However, she wasn't confident about it due to the fact that the Demon King was tier 6. Looking at the final item, which was the Jade Core, Shiro inspected it and couldn't believe what she had just seen. Holy *T. Shiro cried out as she was in complete disbelief. Heavenly Constellation Jade. How the hell can she give something like this away, she thought, seeing the item. Heavenly Constellation Jade read. Activate this jade in order to receive a skill corresponding to the heavenly constellations. Depending on one's potential, the amount of heavenly constellation jades that can be opened is limited. The heavenly constellation jade was an extremely valuable item that she had only seen records of. While it is graded at red, if one was to get a good constellation skill, the value would surpass it easily. However, at the same time, the risks are also just as big. If they got a weak constellation and weak potential, the jade would be wasted. Not only that, there was a higher grade version of this jade, so they would waste their slot if they activated this jade. What's wrong, Teach? Lysandra asked, seeing her sudden outburst. Nothing, I was just surprised at the item. Shiro quickly shook her head. Looking at her system, she was given the prompt of whether or not she wanted to activate the jade. And of course, her answer was yes. Boom. The core in her hands released a blinding light as the skies turned dark. Ting. A light jingle could be heard as stars lit up one by one. Ting 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 ting. As stars continued to light up, Shiro looked at the sky with anticipation. Boom. The first star let off a golden light and started to connect to the other stars. Soon, they were all linked together and sent down a beam of energy towards Shiro. Who didn't know that this was the result of Shiro's item, quickly flew to the side to avoid the beam. Stop. If this princess isn't hit by this light today, watch me disown you. Shiro cried out in shock. Tilted her head in confusion before nodding reluctantly. Forget it, Mum isn't suicidal, she thought. As the light landed on Shiro, she felt a foreign energy permeate through her body. Due to the state of mana links, only a small portion of the heavenly constellation skill is available. As host continues to repair your links, more of the skill will be opened. Current progress, 3%. The light started to fade as Shiro glanced at her new skill. Heavenly Constellation, Aurora, the Eternal Ice Maiden, passive. All ice-related elemental attacks are converted to Eternal Ice. Gained title, Eternal Ice Maiden. Gained Eternal Ice Augmentation. Converted True Elemental Armor, Ice, to Eternal Ice Elemental Armor. Shiro's lips curved into a smile when she saw the skill. That was because even though it was just at 3%, the initial bonus was incredible in her opinion. Not to mention the fact that she knew of the constellation Aurora since it was one that belonged to her old world. Aurora, the Eternal Ice Maiden, is the twin sister of Fyr, the Eternal Fire Maiden. Back her world, there was a myth surrounding this constellation. During her prime, Aurora had fought a devastating battle of which the result was both her and her sister were killed and shattered into the stars. Those who are born under their constellation would either have enhanced ice magic or enhanced fire magic. Not only that, the reason as to why they were called the Eternal Maidens was due to the fact that hardly anyone could melt or put out their magic. Shiro remembered an ice mountain that was rumored to have been created by Aurora. When she saw it, she tried to attack it with all her might, but could barely make a chip on the surface, and that was when she was at tier 6. If the myths were true, she had gained a massive fortune. Naturally, even with this passive skill, her ice wasn't truly eternal since she was only at Tier 2. Anyone in the mid to peak of Tier 3 could shatter her ice easily. But the chance of it becoming eternal was good enough. Smiling lightly, Shiro flexed her fingers as ice started to form around her. This time, the coldness radiating from it was many times bigger than before. Thawing the ice, she took out the bag. Let's see what we get this time. Shiro smiled and opened the bag. Enhanced Fairy Element Core, Orange. A core received from a very powerful elemental fae. Can be used to class up. Shiro's heart pounded in excitement, since this meant she was one step closer to classing up. Right now, all that she was lacking was C-class mana stones, a raid completion with more than 30% contribution, and a corrupted demon core. Seems like you're happy with the rewards Teach. Lysandra smiled. Indeed. By the way, what happened with your sword? Shiro asked as she was quite curious. You can check for yourself, Lysandra said as she gave Shiro her sword. She wasn't afraid of Shiro stealing it since she knew Shiro had better things to do. Looking at the sword, Shiro was surprised to see the passive skill. Light Goddess's Suppression. Suppresses all demonic beings while in the presence of the Light Goddess. However, due to the blessing of the Light Goddess, this is able to weaken the Demon King by 90% for 3 hours. One-time use. Seeing this bonus, Shiro knew that this was a prime chance. Everything she had received right now clearly gave her a chance at clearing the final step of the hidden quest. However, even if the Demon King was suppressed by 90%, he was still a genuine Tier 6 legend. Her mind turned to figure out a plan on how to clear the last step when she inadvertently glanced at her class-up requirements. F***CK, who said that raids had to be dungeon-generated. Can't this princess organize the raid? She thought in realization. Since her goal was to clear the last step, stop the Demon King, it didn't matter if she had to defend or attack. Plus, it can also help her clear one of her class-up requirements. Old man, Shiro called out. What? I just had an idea. You know how Lysandra's sword can now suppress the Demon King by 90% for 3 hours? Why don't we raid his castle with the high-level humans? Shiro suggested with a smile. This is feasible, but they're weakened after so many years of constant fighting. I don't think success is possible. The king frowned. Even a powerhouse couldn't fight for so many years in a row with barely any rest. While the Demon King is weakened, so are they. I can heal them to a certain extent, so it should be fine. But the main thing is whether or not they can join us to raid the Demon King's castle. Shiro persuaded. There's still the problem of the battlefield though. They can't just leave the demons alone, or else the citizens will be killed. The king replied helplessly. Old man, you forget what I can do, didn't you? Just get someone that could command the army to take over and order them while I made everyone a nanotech gunner. Shiro grinned. The king widened his eyes as he realized that this was indeed a possibility. Wouldn't that be too big of a task? He asked in clear disbelief. Nope. The only thing troublesome would be the first ones I create. After that, it'll spread like a virus and convert everyone else without affecting me. Shiro smiled. Okay, I'll send out a signal for a gathering of the Guardians. We can discuss it there. The king said seriously. If there's a chance to get rid of the Demon King, he'll take it. Even more so now that Shiro had convinced him with the amount of trump cards that she kept up her sleeves. Pulling out a talisman, the king bit his thumb and traced it down the middle before throwing it into the air. Splitting up into 9 pieces, the talisman shot off into 9 different directions. We should head to the gathering place now that I've sent out the note. I can guarantee that everyone will attend since we are only allowed 1 note each. The king smiled lightly before pointing in the way towards their destination. Shiro only nodded before closing her eyes. Sitting in a lotus position, she was going to check her mana realm after her glacial magic had been augmented by eternal ice. Opening her eyes once more, she found herself surrounded by 5 islands that were much bigger than before. Naturally, this was due to the fact that each of them were now Tier 3. Floating over to the ice island, she was slightly surprised at the coldness of the place. The entire island was constructed from ice and snow while modes of pale blue light danced around the place. Most importantly, she could see her eternal ice elemental armor within the center of the island. Rather than armor, It was better to describe it as an outfit. The outfit mainly consisted of a sleeveless blue dress, white gloves, and white stockings that were connected to the shoes. Not only that, it was also surrounded by several translucent blue raiments that floated around it, giving the outfit a feeling that it was something a celestial would wear. Just approaching the outfit gave Shiro the chills. Smiling in satisfaction, Shiro glanced towards her true elemental armor on the other islands. It was pretty much the same design, but their respective colors that were linked to the element. The only one that was different would be the shadow armor. The entire outfit seemed like it was made from shadows, which made Shiro feel a little embarrassed since it looked like her bare body would be exposed with a gust of wind. Forget it. Unless I need to. This princess won't wear the shadow true elemental armor. I'm not an exhibitionist. Shiro shook her head and exited the mana realm. ####. After 2 days of travel, the king gestured for Een to land since they have arrived. Looking at their location, Shiro saw that they were going to enter a tall tower in the center of a giant city, much larger than the kingdom. Leading them through the halls, the king pushed open the doors to reveal a grand hall that had 9 authoritative figures sitting on chairs around a table. Old bastard, did your speed decrease with your level? How the hell did you take so long to arrive? One of them laughed in a joking manner. You're still the same. The king chuckled and shook his head. Little Lise, how have you been? Seems like you've had quite the experience, he said as he looked over to Lysandra. I've been fine, thank you. Lysandra replied with a polite smile. And you too are? He asked politely. He remembered that in the note the king had sent out, it stated that 2 very important guests are coming. I'm Shiro, Lysandra's tutor, and this is Een Dash. Mum's number 1 baby. Een grinned, cutting Shiro off. This caused them to look at Shiro once more and saw that she looked quite young. At first, they thought that Een was her little sister or something, but to think it was her daughter. However, they quietly dismissed the thought since there were people who were quite old but looked young due to their power and level. Anyways, sit down and let's discuss how we're going to kill the Demon King. I hear that you have a plan. He smiled and gestured for them to sit down. As everyone sat down around the table, they looked towards Shiro. "Mn, where shall we start?" she asked with a calm smile. Even though everyone was level 100, and some were even 110, Shiro's presence wasn't any smaller than theirs. Her aura even made them feel a little pressured despite the fact that she was only level 50. How about the plan? One of them suggested. "Mn, write the plan. You see, the plan is for us to invade the Demon King's castle and kill him there. Lysandra here has a weapon that's blessed by the goddess which can weaken him by 90%, so this is the best chance we have at killing him. However, I get that you have to worry about your territories. I can say for certain that once you give a few cores to your soldiers, they'll be able to hold off for a while and keep the place safe." Shiro smiled. "Most of our soldiers are level 50 or above. How can you say that you can give them a boost when you, yourself, is only level 50 as well?" One of them asked skeptically. "Mn, I can see where your doubts come from. But here's the thing about the class up. It wouldn't get rid of their level. Think of it as an augment. While they might not be able to use some of their old skills, they'll get new skills that can help them fend off the tide. I'll make sure to write a manual on how to use the class for them. How's that?" Shiro smiled as the 9 of them started to discuss amongst themselves. The king didn't join since he trusts Shiro. "Are you able to prove that the class is really that strong? While we understand that you personally may be strong, but our worry is that the soldiers wouldn't be as strong as we had hoped. Everyone knows that if something is mass-produced, the quality is bound to drop." One of them reminded. Indeed. The king here has been converted, so you can spar with him a little to double-check." Shiro smiled. The 9 looked at each other before nodding. "I'll limit myself to the peak of level 50. One of the younger-looking guardians said as he stood up. "Old Tar, doesn't this remind you of our younger days?" "Huh." The king laughed as he too stood up. "Oh please, if this was the younger days we would need to F***ck off to a mountain range, or else the damage caused would be too big," he replied with a laugh. As the duo talked, they made their way to a training room or sorts while the rest followed. The king took a deep breath as his face was serious. Powerful mana started to revolve around him as nanotech armor appeared. Looking at the armor, the 9 couldn't help but raise an eyebrow. "The technology is nothing like what we have seen. What is it?" One of them muttered curiously. "Nanotech." Shiro smiled. "Nanotech. Think of it as an element. The class that I want to give to your soldiers is called Nanotech Gunner, and the main element would be this. Shiro said, pointing at the king who flexed his fingers and summoned 2 battle axes. Twirling it around to familiarize himself, the king waited for his friend to prepare as well. Asterisk boom. Stomping down with his foot, an orange aura exploded around the one the king called Old Tar. An illusionary dragon appeared behind Old Tar as it wrapped around his body. Ready? He asked with a smile. Ready. The king nodded as the two dashed towards one another. Asterisk TZZZ. The systems on the nanotech armor lit up as the king shot towards Old Tar like a bullet. Looking at the king who demonstrated speed beyond that of which a normal level 50 could produce, the 9 started to re-evaluate the class in a positive light. Twisting his body, the king swung his axe towards Old Tar as a trail of lightning appeared behind the axe. Asterisk dang. Smashing his fist against the axe, Old Tar widened his eyes in shock. How could a simple axe swing be this strong? He thought to himself. While he wasn't blown back, he understood that it was due to his physique as a level 100. If he was a genuine level 50, he would have been suppressed easily. Old Tar, seems like the strength you just used them was more than what a level 50 should have. The king grinned. Perhaps. Old Tar smiled as they started to trade more blows. So, how is it? Shiro asked with a confident smile. Seems like we have underestimated you. If the entire army is made up of this class, then I can say for sure that their power will increase. But that being said, what are you going to do about the long-ranged options? One of them asked. You see, there are multiple variations to the class. Nanotech Rail Berserker is one of the more powerful close-ranged variants. There's also Nanotech Gunner and Warrior. Of course, I won't deny the fact that the more you spread out the class, the weaker it gets. Hence why I want to suggest that those over level 50 can keep their class, and those under level 50 will change. Shiro smiled. After all, you guys should know that those who upgrade from level 50 aren't weak to the point where they need a class from me to help them out. She shrugged as they nodded in understanding. While they were talking, the duo continued to spar. Asterisk bang 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 bang. Every time the king swung his axe, Old Tar would parry it with some difficulty since he was restraining himself. An idea popped into the king's mind as he grinned slightly. Old bastard, looking at your grin you're up to something, aren't you? Old Tar laughed. Heh, this old man is so pure and kind. As if I'll be up to something. The king joked while swinging his axe once more. However, this time, just before impact, the ice disassembled his axe and grabbed Old Tar's wrist. Pulling himself closer to Old Tar, the king kicked Old Tar in the chest and sent him flying towards the walls. Asterisk, boom. IF asterisk king knew it. Old bastard. You haven't changed at all. Old Tar laughed as he climbed out of the wall. Patting the dust off his body, Old Tar charged at the king once more. As the spar between the two continued, the 8 who were watching started to get a better understanding of the class, while Shiro explained to them some extra information. While it is limited to blueprints that they have in their mind, Shiro had already modified it so that several decently powerful weapon blueprints were already within database. An example would be the king's dual battle axes. Giving Shiro a rough count of how many soldiers there were, Shiro started to create cores that will infect the soldiers and upgrade them. She even did the mental math to make sure that the last ones to get infected wouldn't have a class that was only 1% after all. Retrieving some of the storage bracelets that they had in the kingdom treasury, Shiro stored the cores and gave to each of the 9. This should be enough for the army. Shiro smiled as the 9 thanked her sincerely. Is there anything we can give in return? One of them asked. Do you have any more rebirth pills? Also, I need as many C-class mana stones as you can spare. Around 900 if possible. Shiro asked in anticipation. Right now, her rebirth percentage was at 3%, a far cry from 100%. Since this world has rebirth pills, she may as well get as much as she could. Not only that, she also needed an astronomical amount of C-class mana stones. Holy F asterisk CK? Why do you want 900 C-class mana stones? They thought in their mind. Looking at each other awkwardly for a moment, one of them sighed and took out a pill from his storage. This pill is precious. Last time the old bastard over there asked us for one and gave it to you. Now we only have one left, and this is the last one. He smiled apologetically. But since you need it and you've already done so much for us, here you go," he said while handing her the pill. "Thank you. However, as long as we kill the Demon King, this shouldn't be needed anymore." Shiro nodded. "Indeed. As for C-class mana stones, we'll store them into a bracelet and give it to you the next time we meet. For now, though, we'll head back to our territories and convert the army. Wait at the old bastard's kingdom and we'll come find you once we're ready." "All right." Watching the 9 leave, Shiro turned to the king. "Why do they call you old bastard?" she asked curiously. "I lost a bet, and the punishment was that they have to call me old bastard," the king replied as the corner of his lips twitched a little. "That was when we were young, but they got used to it and wouldn't call me anything else." He continued as Lysandra giggled a little at the story. Rolling his eyes, the 4 of them also made their way back to the kingdom. Shiro decided to consume the pill since there was travel time. The scene of an ice block on Yin's back while she flew was rather funny since Yin had to control her heat. She couldn't melt the ice after all. Once they arrived back at the kingdom, Shiro had finished her rebirth, and her mana links were repaired by 2%, increasing her percentage repaired to 5%. For the next several days, Shiro spent the time invading the demon continent with Lysandra and Yin to kill demons since she wanted to see if she could get the corrupted demon core. Unfortunately, she was only able to get regular demon cores. However, she still managed to get a decent amount of mana stones to help her class up. It would have been more if Yin didn't need a few of them. In this time, both Lysandra and Yin had managed to level up a few times. Lysandra increased her level to 78, while Yin was level 53. Checking her class up requirements, Shiro couldn't help but shake her head slightly. Corrupted Elemental Sylph. Class up requirements. 5/4, Tier 3 attunement in 4 elements. 181/1, C-class mana stones. 0/1, C-ranked raid completion with more than 30% contribution. 1/1 Fairy Element Core. 0/1 Corrupted Demon Core. So far, she was almost a fifth of the way through for getting C-ranked mana stones. While she was still lacking quite a bit of mana stones, she was making decent progress. Just as she was going to take Lysandra and Yin to hunt more demons, she felt a vibration in her pocket. Pulling out the crystal, she heard the king's voice. "They're here. We're waiting for you 3 at the kingdom now." "Got it," Shiro replied as she looked towards the 2 who were eating happily. "You 2, we're heading back," Shiro called out. Before she could even say anything, Yin stood up and sighed. "Mum's been abusing this baby as a mount. I want a reward," she said, peeking at Shiro to check her reaction. Smiling wearily, Shiro understood that Yin was doing this since the 9 were coming with as any C-class mana stones as they could spare. Fine, fine. Baby is obedient. Here you go." Shiro patted Yin's head and gave her a few mana stones for snacks. "Thanks, Mum." Yin smiled happily and hugged Shiro. Meanwhile, Lysandra looked at the duo with a sense of longing. Her mother turned out to be a fake while her brother is in the demon continent. As for her father, let's not think about that. Shiro could clearly feel Lysandra's gaze filled with longing as her heart softened a little. "Lisa, come here." Shiro gestured to Lysandra. "Emin, what does it teach?" Without saying anything, Shiro also hugged Lysandra. "Have you ever heard of a saying, teacher for a day, family for life? You can treat me as your family too," she said while stroking her hair. She remembered seeing this when she was browsing the net and thought that this fit the situation quite well. However, the quote was teacher for a day and father for life. She wasn't a guy, so she changed father to family. Hearing what she said, Lysandra widened her eyes before smiling and nodded her head. Meanwhile, Yin, who saw this, also widened her eyes. F***CK? This baby's got competition. ####. Arriving back at the kingdom, they walked towards the war council room and saw all 10 of the guardians armored up and ready. "Little miss, here's your C-ranked mana stones. We weren't able to get 900, but 500 should be decent, right?" One of them smiled. Taking the bracelet, Shiro smiled and thanked the man. "Is everyone ready to raid?" Shiro asked. "Yes." Hidden raid activated, Demon King's Castle. As the 10 guardians got onto their own mounts, Shiro and Lysandra sat on Yin's back. Looking at the current team composition, Shiro was rather satisfied with how things are. In total, there were 13 people. 5 magic-based classes, 3 physical attackers, 3 defensive, and 2 healers. As for their injuries and stamina, Shiro had spared a little of her time to heal each of them. During the healing, she had even managed to find a small shortcut. If she made a piece of equipment that had her skill, Fire of Life, downloaded, she could get them to use their own mana to heal themselves. The result of which surprised them, since they have never seen a fire that could heal someone. If I want to get a 30% contribution in this raid, it will be hard to make up for it during the last boss. If anything, I should kill as many of the bosses at the start. Shiro thought to herself, since this was a great time to class up. Flying over the demon continent, they ventured deeper since the Demon King's castle was quite a journey away. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro could see black dots in the distance that were flying towards them. Flexing her fingers, she created a pair of binoculars. Everyone be careful. A swarm of demon bats are coming. Shiro frowned and warned everyone else. Tracing her finger on the binoculars, she changed them into her eclipse cannon. I'll shoot as many of them down as I can for now, and you guys can fire when they get closer, Shiro said while looking down her scope. While the mages were more powerful than her, their range was shorter. Pressing her palm on Yin's back, a set of nanotech armor wrapped around Yin and increased her speed. Bang. Firing her sniper, a beam of light cut across the sky. However, before it could kill more bats, the first one had detonated his mana and contained the explosion. Seems like they're prepared. Shiro frowned, seeing the bat stop her shot from doing more damage. But that's fine, I suppose. She smiled as she created a second sniper rifle and 4 cannons on Yin's back. Yin, darling, can you handle recoil? Shiro asked. Key. Yin nodded her head as smirked as best as she could. It was almost as if she was saying, "Who do you think I am?" Good. Shiro grinned. Nanobots secured her to Yin's armor so that she wouldn't be blown back from the recoil. A pair of visors dropped down in front of her as Shiro narrowed her eyes. KSSSS. Coils started to extrude from each of the cannons as the ambient mana surged towards her crazily. The 9 who weren't familiar with her power widened their eyes in shock, seeing how much mana was being absorbed by Shiro's cannons. All systems online. Fire, she thought in her mind as she pulled the trigger. Boom. Several beams of light erupted from the cannon and shot towards the bats. This time, no matter how much the bats wanted to detonate their mana in order to contain the explosion, they found it to be impossible since the bullets would drill a hole through the barrier as if it were a piece of paper. Our Nigerian Nairobis. Mana disruption bullets. As if your tiny barriers can stop the bullet. Shiro grinned as she continued to bombard the bats from a distance. By the time the bats entered the mage's range of attack, there was less than 5% of them left. Seems like we've underestimated your prowess. One of the guardians laughed as he flicked his finger and sent several waves of lightning orbs towards the remaining swarm of bats. Perhaps, but who wouldn't? Level 50s can only do so much after all. Shiro smiled. She wasn't offended at all since she had underestimated people before. Indeed, in fairness, one's prowess only shows once they're level 51. Before that, you can say that you're still a child in a way. Past level 51 is when you start to make a difference. He smiled and shook his head slightly. The jump from level 50 to 51 was astounding, as the differences were like a child trying to fight a teenager. However, for people like Shiro, she was like a child with a gun. That gun will let her bridge the difference between her and people past level 50. Continuing their trip towards the Demon King's castle, they were constantly bombarded by flying units that didn't care for their lives. Looking at her system, she knew that the raid had already started. So far, her contribution was at 74%, which was good news since it will help her get that final 30% that she needed. I see the castle, one of the guardians said seriously as he pulled on his mount's reins. I can sense defensive formations in the sky, so we'll have to enter the castle by foot. Everyone be wary, another guardian warned as he dived down with his mount. Looking at everyone else, Shiro nodded her head and flew down with Yin and Lysandra. Landing in front of the main gate, Yin shifted back to her human form. Her face was a little pale, since she could clearly feel the dense amount of bloodthirst within the castle that rivaled Shiro's bloodthirst. We have to be careful from this point on, Shiro said as her face was also serious. As a veteran who had faced countless enemies in battle, she knew that this was going to be a hard fight. Even just being in the presence of the castle brought shivers down her spine. She knew that whoever was inside was a genuine Tier 6 powerhouse. Only question being why he hasn't attacked them straight away. Moving into formation, the three defensive class guardians stood at the front of the party while the physical-based guardians stood behind them. This group included Lysandra and Shiro since she could be also classed as a physical attack-based class user. Naturally, the mages and healers stood at the back. "Let's go," one of the defenders said as they led the way through the castle gates. Looking at the architecture, she could see the walls and floors being made from a dark purple material that solidified depending on the amount of mana that was being funneled through them. Interesting, Shiro thought. If she was able to get some of this material and give it to Helion so that he could forge it into a set of armor, there was no doubt that it was going to be a strong piece of equipment. Who knows, it might even reach orange grade. Shaking her mind of the stray thoughts, Shiro focused on her surroundings. The moment she felt any movement, she would attack without hesitation. Flexing her fingers, a hand cannon materialized in her hands. Asterisk, boom. A dense wave of pressure washed over them as demons started to crawl through the walls. An ambush. Mages and healers moved to the middle. Tankers, spread yourself out evenly. The main defender shouted out as his body erupted with a golden glow. Illusionary pieces of armor wrapped around his body as he slammed his shield into the ground. Mass taunt. Asterisk Yura. All of the demons roared in a frenzy as they charged towards the tankers. The other two also activated their taunt skills while the other members of the party started to take down the demons. Lysandra spread out her angel wings and flew slightly above the demons and started to slash away without any regard. As for Ian, she hovered in the middle of the formation and flicked tiny sparks of dark star elements that would detonate itself in the middle of a giant crowd. Asterisk, bang 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 bang. With a gun in one hand and ataraxia in the other, Shiro danced through the crowd of demons with ease. Asterisk ting. Parrying a claw with her sword, Shiro twisted her body and aimed her gun at the back of the demon's head. Asterisk bang. Quickly glancing around her, she saw that she was about to be hit from several directions. She curved the corners of her lips into a soft smile as she jumped up slightly and twisted her body, dodging the attacks by the skin of her teeth. Flicking her sword up, she made another hand cannon and pulled the triggers several times at the demons. Asterisk bang 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 bang. Every shot was a headshot without exception. Landing softly, she disassembled one of her hand cannons and caught the sword with ease. Her marksmanship is remarkable, one of the guardians praised with a smile. Indeed, another agreed with him. Enough chit-chat. Let's kill these curs. Old Tar, the one who fought the king, grinned as draconic energy burst out of his body. Pulling his fist back, a fire erupted out around it and morphed into the shape of a dragon head witch. HAA. Punching out with his fist, an illusionary dragon appeared and started to devour everything in its way. Even the material that could harden with mana had a few layers scraped off the surface. Asterisk bang. A line of corpses could be seen as Shiro was slightly surprised at his power. Impressive, Shiro praised. Not as impressive as you. I can't do what you are doing now when I'm level 50. He laughed. Asterisk bang. You flatter me. I'm sure you're the same. Shiro chuckled while pulling the trigger which killed a demon that tried to sneak up behind her. As they slaughtered their way through the ambush, they were rather relaxed since each of them were experienced in fighting against an army alone with a few exceptions such as the healer. Asterisk Pushi. Decapitating the last demon, Shiro stored her sword away and glanced at the contribution chart. My contributions have decreased to 67%, she thought with a slight frown. Shaking her head, she decided to achieve more in the boss fights to increase her contribution. Just as they were about to continue, one of the guardians raised up his hand to stop the party before crouching down. What is he doing? Ian asked curiously. He's currently mapping out the Demon King's castle and forming the quickest route we have to take. This way, we can save some stamina. The king smiled. How I see. Pulses of mana could be seen spreading out from his hand as Shiro understood the concept of what he was doing. It was very similar to the scanners that she would make since they too mapped out an area through spreading mana. All right, follow me. I've found the quickest route. He smiled before standing up. Following behind him, the group kept their guard up. On the way to the first main room, they were ambushed several times by demons. However, they were taken care of easily since the group had already gotten used to their movement. Asterisk bang. Pushing open the door to the first room, they were shocked to see a giant magic crystal in the center of the room. The sheer size of the crystal caused them to wonder how much mana had been stored inside, since it was comparable to a large house. But that wasn't the main problem. The main problem was the presence of a giant white snake that wrapped around the crystal. Luna Devouring Serpent, LVL 60 Boss. HP 30,000, 000/30, 000/000. MP 30, 000/30, 000/000. The Luna Devouring Serpent is a pet of the Demon King. Be careful of its gaze since it can freeze you in place for a short time and will attack you. One of the defenders frowned when he saw the serpent. Asterisk SSSSS. A loud hiss could be heard as the serpent started to uncoil itself. Glaring at the intruders, it narrowed its eyes dangerously. Spread out. Physical-based classes pair up with mages and will work in twos. Little birdie, you take the healer into the sky and help her get an overall outlook on the battlefield. No matter what, we cannot allow the healer to be injured. Looking over at Shiro, In wanted to see her reaction. Go. Shiro nodded. Shifting herself into her phoenix form, that was smaller than usual due to the size of the room, In picked up the healer and took her into the air. The main problem is to watch out for its crowd control. Otherwise, just deal as much damage as you can and we'll adapt to it during the fight. They had no choice since there was limited information about the monster. Tapping her necklace, Shiro brought out her swords as she grabbed two of them. Since the size of the snake was quite big, she was probably safer if she climbed onto its back. Let's go, Lisa. Shiro smiled, dashing towards the snake. Got it. Lysandra nodded. Ataraxia Elemental Shift, Shadow. Activating her skill, all of Shiro's swords started to release a faint layer of black mist as she used the augmented shadow element. This was by far one of her most powerful elements since it could corrode the enemy to a certain extent. Jumping up onto the serpent's scales, Shiro twisted her body and slashed her sword as hard as she could. Asterisk dang. Seeing her sword bounce off, Shiro widened her eyes in surprise. F***CK? If I had used my gun, couldn't I have shot myself with my bullet because of the deflection? She thought to herself. However, she quickly calmed herself down and focused her mind entirely. Her face became blank as she entered a state of complete focus. Looking at her state, the 10 guardians were once again completely shocked since this was a state that only the most experienced could enter. Even they struggled a little to enter this state. In-style Azura's Path, Azura's Sword Path, plus Phantom Path. Dashing forwards, Shiro flickered out of their view. Asterisk Pushi. By the time they saw her again, they found a fountain of blood spraying into the air since several scales were pried up from the serpent's back. A 3-layered magic circle appeared in her hands as she slammed it into the wound. Asterisk TSSSS. Augmented shadow element invaded the serpent's body as Shiro smiled cruelly. Since I can't wound it heavily on the outside, I'll kill it inside out. Shah. Crying out from the pain, the serpent thrashed around in an attempt to kill Shiro. However, Shiro gracefully flipped backwards to avoid its rampage. Asterisk dong. A bell toll rang out as Lysandra dashed towards the serpent's head with her sword that was basked in a holy aura. Asterisk boom. Slashing out with as much force as she could muster, her sword lacerated deeply into the serpent's skull. Asterisk bang. Arc. Crying out in pain, Lysandra was slammed against the wall by the serpent's head. However, she was quickly healed. Glaring at the serpent, Lysandra pushed against the head as she used the walls as a foothold. A contest of strength sparked between the two as the serpent wanted to crush Lysandra into a meat paste. Oomph. You dare harm her in front of me. Both Shiro and the king said at the same time. Flickering in front of the serpent, Shiro twisted her body as she swung her swords. A magnificent galaxy trailed behind them as she coated them with Dark Star Element. It was unfortunate that they didn't have a Dark Star Elemental Shift, but she'll make do for now. AS for the king. All his systems were on overdrive as he merged his dual axes into a giant war axe and swung against the serpent's cranium. Asterisk, boom bang. Recoiling in pain, the serpent crashed against the crystal. A chance, Shiro thought as she let her swords float around her. Tracing a line in the air in front of her, she created the strongest nanotech bow that she could. Pulling back on the strings, Shiro was surprised at the tension since even she struggled a little despite the fact that her strength was twice as strong as normal level 50s. The more she pulled back on her strings, the faster mana would surge towards her as a black arrow started to appear between her fingers. Calamity Dragon Arrow. However, this wasn't the same Calamity Dragon Arrow that killed the wyvern. No, it was more powerful due to the fact that Shiro now augmented it with Dark Star element. Not only that, due to the fact that her links had healed up by 6%, the amount of mana she could use had also increased. Quickly glancing at her arm, Shiro knew that she wasn't able to continue gathering mana since she was soon reaching her limit. But this was enough. Asterisk, bang. Letting go of the arrow, Shiro's body was launched back from the recoil. However, she kept her eyes on the arrow as it pierced through the serpent's eyelids and into its eye. Nubedes. F asterisk CK. This princess used everything, and it only pierced the eyelid. Shiro muttered as she felt the corner of her lips twitch. As it stands, the thought of getting 30% contribution seemed to slowly drift out of her reach. Shaking her head with annoyance, she gritted her teeth since she wasn't satisfied. Unless she ripped the goddamn eye out, she wouldn't be satisfied at all. Tapping her chest, nanobots started to spread out of her fingertips as a layer of armor was created. Generation 1 Divine Warrior Armor activated. All systems online. She muttered coldly. Unlike the Generation 2 Battle Maiden that she had worn during the battle against the Callous Magger, the Generation 1 Divine Warrior focused on close quarters power output rather than range bombardment. Asterisk Kish Kish. Several boosters appeared behind her as mana was drawn towards them. Asterisk boom. Igniting the boosters, her figure shot towards the serpent like a cannonball. Ha! She shouted out as she twisted her body and punched towards the arrow that was still embedded within the serpent's eye. Asterisk Poochie. Asterisk HSSSSSS. Blood sprayed everywhere as her punch had destroyed the eye with ease. Drilling into the serpent's skull, almost everyone was shocked at the amount of damage she could cause to a monster that was an entire class above her. Reaching out with her hand, Shiro created 2 giant hooks that dug into the remaining pieces of the eye before flying out of the serpent's eye socket. RHH. She cried out as she exerted as much strength as she could. Asterisk rip. Looking at Shiro, who had just ripped the eye of the serpent right out of its socket, the rest of the group, apart from Ian and Lysandra, dropped their jaw in shock. Are you sure she isn't hiding her level? One of the Guardians cried out in disbelief since this kind of power output was clearly above what level 50s could produce. Hell, he even suspected that it could compare with level 55s. F asterisk CK? Why are you dazed? Kill it. Shiro shouted out since her body was in a state of fatigue after exerting herself to pull that eye out. Releasing her armor, she retreated away from the serpent so that she could be healed. She's right, we can't be outdone by a level 50. Where would our pride go? One of the Guardians laughed as he pointed his sword at the serpent. A golden aura erupted out of him as he pulled his sword back. HAA. He cried out as he slashed his sword horizontally. Asterisk boom. A golden wave of energy slashed towards the serpent as it almost cut off its head in one go. Damn, Shiro muttered wearily. After exerting herself, she was only able to pull out an eye. Meanwhile, the Guardian managed to almost kill it with a single swing of his sword. The rest of the fight was pretty one-sided. Under the bombardment of several level 100s, the serpent died quickly. As for the rewards, they were given to Shiro since they had no use for such equipment. Looking at the giant mana crystals in the middle of the room, Shiro wondered if they could harvest this. Pulling her fist back, she punched the crystal as hard as she could, causing a spider web of cracks to spread all over the surface. Grabbing one of the pieces, Shiro sighed. Ruined mana crystal. After being detached from the source, this crystal had now become a useless piece of decoration. It won't be that easy, huh? Shiro thought to herself. What's wrong? One of the guardians asked since they knew that Shiro needed the mana stones. Nothing. It's just that I'm not able to harvest this. Shiro shook her head. Damn, that's quite unfortunate. He replied, looking at the giant crystal in shame. Well, there is plenty of time to gather the mana stones after we kill the Demon King. He smiled as Shiro nodded. While they were making their way to the next boss, Shiro glanced at the contribution list and sighed. Shiro, 61% contribution. If we can fight the Demon King earlier, I'll be able to keep more of my contributions. Shiro thought to herself. For the next 3 bosses, Shiro barely managed to hang on to her contributions since her level was much lower than others. By the time they killed the 3rd boss, Shiro's contributions stopped at 40%. She wondered if there were more bosses, but according to one of the guardians, there were no more main rooms after the current one, meaning they only need to face off against the Demon King. However, before they could enter the Demon King's throne room, they were blocked by a 7x7 grid wall that was filled with runes. From Shiro's understandings, she could tell that one needed to rearrange the runes so that it flowed properly. But if there were any mistakes in the flow, the one who arranged the runes would suffer a backlash. Seems like we'll have to clear this obstacle before reaching the king. One of the guardians muttered, seeing a giant wall filled with runes. Does any one of you know how to solve rune walls? He asked since he had never bothered to solve rune walls. I can. Shiro smiled. Previously, when she constructed the rune key for the goddess's chamber, it was done through analyzing the rune wall. Looking at the rune wall in front of her, while she couldn't understand a lot of it, she had her ways of deciphering the code. Anyone else? The more people we have, the better our chances. He nodded and looked at the others. Brother Callie, we've spent our years defending our territory. Do you think we'll have the time to study rune walls? Someone replied as her smile twitched slightly. Fine, Miss Shiro, we'll be counting on you. However, if you do make a mistake somewhere, don't worry. We have a way to redirect the backlash onto ourselves. Callie said, turning to Shiro. I'll be relying on you then. She smiled. Walking up to the rune wall, Shiro flexed her fingers and created a tablet in her hand. While she could use her brain to decode everything, having a program to sort everything out was advised. The only thing she needed to do was figure out the meaning of the runes and combine them together. However, just as she started to solve the rune wall, demonic insects started to crawl out of the walls as they charged towards the party. Focus on solving the wall. We'll handle this. Callie frowned as the situation was quite serious. Each of the insects were around level 70, and there seemed to be an unending swarm of them. While they were indeed level 100, it was still going to be a pain to have to protect Shiro while fending off a wave of high-level monsters. Shiro didn't reply and only nodded her head since she knew that the sooner she solves this rune wall, the better. Inputting the runes that she understood in the program, she started to run several simulations to decipher the meaning of the other runes. While she was doing this, the sounds of combat could be heard behind her as the party were holding up pretty well. However, even though that was the case, they were still getting pushed back due to the sheer number of monsters surrounding them. One of the guardians peeked back at Shiro to see how she was doing, but widened his eyes in surprise when he saw the speed of which she was working at. Her hands blurred as countless runes appeared and disappeared continuously on the screen. Hopefully this should work, she muttered with a frown. She wasn't confident about the solution since she couldn't recognize some of the runes and could only guess. Raising her hand, she started to rearrange the runes. Asterisk clack. As the last rune fell in place, a horrific burst of mana surged towards her. F***CK? Holden, Callie shouted out as he saw that Shiro's solution failed. Sacrificial substitute. Holden shouted out as all of the damage was redirected onto him. Gah! He screamed. Blood poured through the cracks of his armor as he kneeled down. Heal him, Callie commanded. Sorry, I've got it now. Shiro apologized since the failure right now gave her the last piece to the puzzle. Her mistake lay in the fact that she had mixed up the meanings of 2 runes which formed an anomaly in the rune sequence. Raising her hand once more, she quickly rearranged the rune wall. Asterisk clack. Rumble. Unlike before, there was no horrific mana that threatened to turn her into a pool of blood. This time, the wall sunk into the ground as the path towards the Demon King's throne room came into view. Go! Callie shouted out. The party quickly charged through the opening as they watched the monsters retreat. Must be because this is the way leading to the Demon King's throne room, Callie concluded. Looking at the rest of the party, they brought out a few pills and started to recover. *KRRR. Pushing open the door, they saw a handsome youth sitting on the throne with void black armor covering everything but his head. When Lysandra and the king saw the youth, their eyes widened in surprise. Brother. Son. Just as they were going to run up the youth, they were stopped by Shiro and Callie. Look carefully. That's not your brother anymore, Shiro said apologetically. Corrupted Demon King, soul-possessed state, LVL? HP/MP/? He's in a soul-possessed state, meaning his original soul had been consumed already. A demon has taken over your brother's body, Shiro explained. The words were like thunder in Lysandra's ears. Her emotions crashed down instantly as her disappointment grew. She thought that she was finally going to be reunited with her brother, but now the truth was revealed. He was just a corpse possessed by a different soul. Her brother had already died. Gritting her teeth and clenching her fists, she tried to suppress the violent turbulence of rage that was boiling inside her. Father, let's kill this imposter for his sin of abusing brother's body, Lysandra said as she glared at the Demon King. The king nodded as a layer of armor wrapped around his body. Light goddess's suppression, Lysandra cried out as she raised her sword at the Demon King. *Boom. A ray of holy light descended from the sky as it crashed through the castle and onto the Demon King. Flinching slightly from the pain, the Demon King looked at the party with a frown on his face. Corrupted Demon King, soul-possessed state, LVL 100 suppressed. HP 150,000,000/ MP 100,000,000/ Corrupted Demon King, soul-possessed state, LVL 100 suppressed. HP 150,000,000/ MP 100,000,000/ Looking at the Demon King's suppressed stats, Shiro turned to the other guardians and nodded her head. *Boom. Golden aura exploded out of all the members as they were going to finish this fight as quick as possible. Lysandra also coated her body in a holy aura as she charged towards the Demon King. Her killing intent burst forwards, shocking the party since they didn't think someone like Lysandra could be this scary. As for Shiro, she was the lowest level here, so she could only activate the Generation 2 Battle Maiden and shoot the Demon King from afar. *Boom boom boom boom. A single swipe of his hands was all he needed to do in order for him to destroy the bullets. Damn. Shiro clicked her tongue in annoyance. However, before the Demon King could target her, he had to quickly erect a barrier to protect himself from 5 different attacks. URG. Groaning slightly, the Demon King slammed his hand down onto the ground. *Boom. A giant magic circle exploded out from under him. Watch out. It's a Tier 4 spell, Shiro warned. Jumping up, she aimed her weapons and loaded them with mana disruption bullets. *Bang bang bang bang. However, the Demon King merely glanced at her before scoffing lightly. *Boom. A burst of mana erupted out from him as it pushed everyone back, including the bullets. Raising his hand, the Demon King clenched his fist and activated his spell. Crack. Widening her eyes in horror, Shiro watched as the void fissures started to appear everywhere in the room. Corrupted Maelstrom, the Demon King said coldly. Come near me. One of the tankers shouted out. Slamming his shield into the ground, his MP started to empty out at a visible rate. Sanctuary. Dawn. A giant illusionary castle covered the party. Bang 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 bang. Watching the wind crash against the castle, the party felt sweat drip down their face. Under the constant bombardment of the corrupted Maelstrom, they could see cracks forming everywhere on the castle. Back me up. Got it. Understood. Standing next to the first tanker, the other two slammed their shields down and activated their best defense skills. While the 3 tankers were trying their best in fending off against the attack, the rest of the party weren't idle either. While the healer activated her buff, In also did the same and used Dark Star Empowerment. Feeling their increase in strength, the party looked at each other and nodded their heads. The longer we take, the harder this fight will be. Use everything you have, Callie shouted out. Tensing up his body, a ball of fire exploded around him as his elemental armor appeared. Following his lead, the rest of the party also activated their elemental armor, including Lysandra and Ian. Lysandra's armor made her look like a warrior angel that was sent down to judge all sinners. The armor itself was colored white with golden highlights around the edges. Not only that, she also had a red dress under that armor. The front and back of the dress extended to her knees while the sides were separated so that it wouldn't affect her movement. As for Ian, her elemental armor was mostly cloth rather than armor. She wore full black gothic Lolita dress that had black frilled along with black semi-transparent silk. Her black wings made her look like a fallen angel, the complete opposite of Lysandra. However, they weren't done. Golden Dragon Berserker. Old Tar shouted out as scales started to appear on his body. Violent auras burst out of the party members as they each used their best berserk skills. Unfortunately, neither Ian nor Lysandra owned a berserk skill, so they could only fight with their elemental armor. Shiro wanted to do the same, but she needed to be careful. She had 3 strong berserk skills that would help, but their backlash was just as strong. Fifth Phantom, Soul Sword, and Ataraxia. The fifth Phantom was arguable since she couldn't fully control it. But berserk skills weren't her only option. She also had the choice to use her power boost items, Calamity Dragon Scale and the Silver Dagger, to boost her power into the realm of C class. Even if I stack everything I have together, I'm not sure I can defeat the Demon King alone without the use of my power boost items. But if I don't use it, I don't think I can get 30% contribution. Shiro thought with a frown. In the end, she decided to only use her true elemental armor for now. Depending on how the situation develops, she'll use her other skills. Closing her eyes, she focused her mind. Asterisk boom. A giant snowflake expanded out from her foot as ice crystals formed around her. Snapping her fingers, they shattered into hundreds of shards that surged towards her body, wrapping her up into a giant ice block before cracking apart to reveal Shiro in her eternal ice armor. Full. Breathing out a cloud of cold mist, Shiro opened her eyes. Her new appearance with her eternal ice armor caused a few of the guardians to look at her with shock in their eyes. However, they quickly recovered since they needed to focus on the Demon King. Stomping on the ground, Shiro launched herself towards the Demon King. She flexed her fingers and summoned Ataraxia along with her weapon that came with the eternal ice armor. So it's a pair of crystal boots and a rapier? She raised an eyebrow. However, she ignored it and stabbed towards the Demon King. Activating her sword skill, Refraction, her rapier split into several copies, confusing the Demon King. Furrowing his brows, he flicked his finger upwards as the gravity suddenly shifted. Surprised at the sudden change in gravity, Shiro twisted her body and kicked towards the Demon King's head. Asterisk bang. He grabbed her foot with ease as she frowned. Sensing the party dashing towards the Demon King, she focused her killing intent on him, rooting him in place for a short moment. Using this gap to slip into the rift, Shiro retreated from the area. Asterisk bang 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 bang. The party bombarded the Demon King with their strongest skills as he started to struggle. Compared to his previously large 150 million HP, he only had 100 million left, and it was decreasing quickly. Yura! Shouting out in rage, the Demon King clenched his fist and punched towards the closest tanker. Asterisk Pucci. Widening his eyes in shock, the tanker watched as the fist penetrate the shield with ease and through his body. Pulling his fist out, a 4-layered magic circle appeared around his fist as the tanker was soon reduced to ash. Griston, Callie shouted out in rage. Gritting his teeth, he stabbed his sword through his hand before pulling it out. Grabbing the blood that flowed out from his hand, he formed a second sword and dashed towards the Demon King. Blood Arts. Sacrificial Power. Asterisk boom. His slash lacerated deeply into the Demon King, but failed to completely cut him in half. However, what happened next shocked him the most. Sticking his hand into his sword wound, the Demon King created an exact replica of Callie's blood sword. Before Callie could even shout, he was cleaved in half by the very same skill. Sarah, Revive them. One of the remaining tankers shouted out as he slammed his shield into the Demon King's back. Divine resurrection. Sarah shouted out as she slammed her staff into the ground. A golden light appeared around Callie and Griston as their bodies twitched for a moment before standing up straight. Tisk, be careful. It seems like he can replicate any skills that he's been wounded by. Callie frowned, while quickly downing a potion to recover the rest of his health. Sarah looked a little pale after resurrecting the two of them as she quickly retreated away from the front lines. As the Demon King focused on the main attackers, Lysandra and Ian jumped into the rift. Appearing behind the Demon King, Lysandra's sword was basked in a holy glow while a deadly orb of dark star element was in Yin's hand. Asterisk clang. Boom. Unfortunately, the Demon King managed to block both their attacks and grabbed them by the wrist. Lisa, Ian, Shiro shouted out as she had a giant rail cannon in her hands. Pulling the trigger, she fired towards the Demon King in order to force him to let go of them both. Asterisk bang. Slamming both Ian and Lysandra into the ground, the Demon King punched towards the bullet and shattered it easily. Just as he was about to finish Ian and Lysandra off, several party members slammed their weapons into him and sent him crashing against the walls. Meanwhile, Shiro ran over and pulled both Ian and Lysandra away from the fight. Two sparks of life fire flared up on her fingertips as she quickly healed both of them. You two all right? Shiro asked with concern. Yeah, just surprised at his reaction speed, that's all. Lysandra nodded as she rubbed her head in pain. Before she could ask another question, she felt a horrific aura diffuse into the surroundings as dark mist could be seen creeping towards him. Run! It's a party wipe skill, Shiro shouted out with a frown. If the party members die now, she doubted that Sarah would be able to revive them. Looking at Ian, they nodded to each other before dashing into the rift. Appearing near the party members, they dragged in as many as they could. However, the Demon King only scoffed before swiping with his hand. Gah! Both Shiro and Ian were forced out of the rift as their body was sent crashing backwards. Coughing up a mouthing of blood, Shiro frowned when she felt several bones in her body shattered due to a single attack. F***CK. Shiro cursed in her mind as she healed herself with her life fire. Stabilizing herself, she watched as the black mist wrapped around the party members and drained them of their blood and flesh. Widening her eyes in shock, she realized that there were only 6 members of their party left. Her, Ian, Lysandra, Sarah, the King, and Old Tar. Both the King and Old Tar was heavily injured due to the fact that they were just within the range of the party wipe skill. As for Sarah, she was still recovering from her injuries. TSK, you're really forcing this princess to go all out, huh? Shiro frowned. Looking at the Demon King's HP, she saw that he still had 70 million points left. It's doable, she muttered, narrowing her eyes at the Demon King. Asterisk, boom. Generation 1 Divine Warrior armor wrapped around her as she placed her hand over the center of her chest. Soul Sword, she commanded. A radiant aura burst out of her body before it was quickly corroded away by black tendrils. Following which, a demonic aura burst out of her as Lysandra widened her eyes in shock since she was sensitive towards evil aura. Shiro felt a handle touch her palm as she grabbed it without hesitation and pulled out her soul sword. Asterisk bang. The floor tiles cracked apart from the force of which she pulled out her sword. Glancing downwards, she was surprised at what she saw. A pure black blade that was decorated with blood-red runes. There was no guard as the blade and handle were connected as one. In addition to this, black tendrils wrapped around the handle as grips while they crept up on her hand. Even Shiro felt a little chilled when she saw it slither up her arm like a snake. Demonic Soul Sword, Shiro. A manifestation of Shiro's soul. A sword that will consume and destroy everything that stands against it. One slice against the skin will inject a lethal poison through their systems while their soul is slowly corrupted. Once it strikes the heart, it will consume the enemy's soul, forcing them away from the path of reincarnation while trapping them within the sword for eternity. Can burn the souls that the sword had consumed to empower your next attack. Slice it on yourself, and all of your positive emotions will be locked away, leaving the perfect killing machine behind for a short while in order to eradicate your enemies. This is my soul, she questioned herself in disbelief. However, She quickly recovered since this is no time to stay idle. Flicking up ataraxia, Shiro bit her thumb before catching her sword once more. Pressing her bloodied thumb against the guard, she watched as the dark red runes light up. Sword skill, ataraxia. Color drained from her vision, forcing her into a monochromatic world that was filled with red dots to show weak spots. Crouching down slightly, she activated Phantom Path along with Azura's Sword Path and disappeared from her spot. Asterisk clang. Flicking back into view behind the Demon King, her sword slammed against his armor. Widening his eyes in surprise, he wondered why his body felt sluggish. Naturally, that was due to one of the effects of ataraxia. Enemies within your area of control are affected with minus 30% speed, minus 20% DF, minus 10% reaction, and a small chance to lose focus for a short moment of time, exposing their weak points. You're mine. Shiro grinned coldly. Asterisk clang clang clang. While she was indeed forcing the Demon King into a tough situation, she knew that this wasn't enough. Even with her increase in speed and the Demon King's decrease in speed, he was still barely keeping up with her, stopping her from injuring him. He knew that the moment the black blade cut him, he would be in trouble. This isn't enough, Shiro thought to herself with a frown. Twisting her body, she swung her swords towards the Demon King with refraction activated. However, instead of trying to block the swords, the Demon King merely dodged them and counterattacked. Gritting her teeth, Shiro flipped ataraxia into a reverse grip and blocked the Demon King's counterpunch. Asterisk bang. Sliding back a few steps, she stopped herself from coughing up a mouthful of blood. Tisk. In the end, you're still a Demon King, huh? Shiro smiled lightly as his reaction speed and physique surprised her even though he was suppressed. I'll help, the king shouted out as he had recovered from his injuries. Stop. I can handle this on my own, Shiro shouted back before charging at the Demon King once more. Like her, the king was level 50 and all that will happen is him getting injured once more. She'll rather him stay safe than Lysandra suffering the loss of another family member. Looking at her power boost items, she knew that she'll have to make her mind up quickly. Time was running out for her berserk skills, and once that happens, she'll be in trouble. Thankfully, however, the Calamity Dragon scales had 3 charges. This meant that she could use it 3 times to save herself. Using one of them to guarantee a quest completion was still within an acceptable range for Shiro. Bending her body back to avoid a punch, slashed upwards with her soul sword. Asterisk crack. A crack appeared on the armor as a trail of blood leaked onto her blade. Chance, Shiro thought to herself. Swinging ataraxia towards her soul sword, Shiro pushed the sword deeper. However, the Demon King released a pulse of mana, forcing her to retreat away from him. Looking at his arm, he frowned before ripping his arm off with determination. It was either losing an arm or losing his life. Oh, pretty determined, aren't you? However, the poison's already in your body, and your soul will still suffer. Shiro grinned. She could see the Demon King's face pale slightly as sweat dripped off his face. Quickly pulling out the Calamity Dragon scale, she activated one of the charges. Asterisk roar. A dragon roar filled the room as Shiro's aura exploded out with power. Stretching her body slightly, she smiled, feeling powerful mana course through her body. Asterisk bang. Clashing against the Demon King once more, she forced him to kneel heavily against the ground. Right now, she only had 3 minutes left on her soul sword while her sword skill, ataraxia, had already ran out. Her vision blurred while her body ached. OBS. The backlash of ataraxia was a loss of 60% vision for 5 hours while suffering from 50% muscle fatigue. She could resist muscle fatigue due to her massive pain tolerance. As for her loss of vision, a simple pair of nanotech glasses fixed that up easily. Flicking her wrist, Shiro broke the Demon King's guard and swung down with her soul sword. Quickly rolling to the side, the Demon King dodged the sword narrowly but was soon greeted with a roundhouse kick to the face. Asterisk bang. Crashing against the wall, he crawled out with blood flowing out of his head. Only 15 million HP left, huh? Shiro smiled while appearing in front of the Demon King. Asterisk boom. Throne World. She cried out in shock seeing the Demon King sacrifice 5 million points of HP to forcefully activate his skill. The void within the room twisted around as everyone was forced into the Demon King's throne world. Looking at the Demon King who sat on the throne with a frown, Shiro could see thousands of level 70 demons behind him. Focus on the Demon King, teach. I'll take care of the cannon fodder. Lysandra shouted out as she spread her wings out and dashing into the sky. I'm going to help little Lise. Een cried out as she too flew into the sky. Shiro curved her lips into a slight smile when she saw the two work together. Een style Azura's path, phantom path. The Demon King quickly erected a barrier around himself when he saw Shiro disappear from her spot. However, he underestimated her. Just because I used my berserk skill, it doesn't mean I can't make more guns. She smiled with ataraxia held in her mouth. In her empty hand, a hand cannon was being created, but this time it was much more powerful than her previous weapons. With the power rivaling a peak C class at her disposal, she created the most powerful hand cannon she could. Asterisk bang. Ping. Shattering the barrier with ease, the bullet drilled towards the Demon King's shoulder. Asterisk urg. Grunting in pain, the Demon King quickly retreated from his throne. Asterisk ting. Shiro flicked ataraxia with her finger as she caught it and dashed towards the Demon King. Frozen Hell. Ice Demon's Calamitous Domain plus Ice Palace. Asterisk KRRR. A giant ice palace erected around the two of them as black snow started to fall. Quickly activating another barrier, the Demon King watched as the snowflakes eat away at his mana with a concerned frown. Asterisk bang. Ping. Once again, Shiro created a hand cannon and destroyed the barrier. However, the Demon King frowned when he saw the bullet hit his barrier from behind rather than in front, where Shiro was. Asterisk Poochie. Looking down in horror, he saw a pitch-black blade piercing through his torso. Cold Illusion. One of the best ambush skills I have. Shiro chuckled behind him as black tendrils started to eat away at his heart. Pulling out her blade, she saw an illusionary image of the Demon King being dragged into her sword by the black tendrils. F***CK? This blade does consume their souls. Shiro widened her eyes in surprise. Asterisk bang. Kneeling down lifelessly, the Demon King's body started to crumble away into ash as a dark purple orb was left in his place. Deactivating her soul sword berserk skill, Shiro picked the orb up while ignoring the pain that filled her body. Corrupted Demon King Core. A core taken from a corrupted Demon King, a being at the peak of Tier 6. Smiling in satisfaction, she looked up to see Lysandra and Een on a killing spree with the demons. However, since the Demon King was killed, the rest of the demons faded into dust. We've won. Shiro smiled as she checked her contributions. Shiro, 35%. Thankfully, it's over 30%, or else this task would be such a pain to complete. Walking over to the king, they were about to celebrate when she frowned. Che, really? One thing after another. She frowned, seeing the goddess slowly appear. You did well. Now, let me reward you. The goddess said softly as she landed in front of Lysandra. But before she could do anything, Shiro pulled Lysandra back away from the goddess. Humph, do you think everyone is a fool? You dare try to snatch her body in front of me, Shiro said with a cold smile. She could see the quest timer slowly tick down since she had completed the quest. What do you mean? I just want to reward my successor. The goddess frowned, but her heart pounded with nervousness. How did she know? She thought to herself. Ha ha ha, you think I'm an idiot? Shiro smiled coldly. Looking at her time, Shiro turned to Lysandra. She wants to take over your body like what the demon did to your brother. I can stop this if I link your soul up to mine. Quickly make a choice since I'm about to leave this place. Shiro said seriously as she dragged Lysandra into the rift. What do you mean, teach? Lysandra widened her eyes in confusion. I don't have much time left to explain. I just want to know if you trust me or not. Shiro frowned, seeing the goddess rip open the rift with anger visible on her face. Thinking for a short moment, Lysandra turned to her father, who had a smile on his face, and nodded his head. From what he could understand, Shiro would never do Lysandra any harm. Since she said that the goddess wanted to take over Lysandra's body, she must be telling the truth. I trust you. Lysandra nodded. Good. I'm going to form a lifeblood contract with you. I wish I can choose other contracts, but this is the only one I can do. Shiro said seriously as time was running out. She only had a few seconds left. Biting the tip of her finger, she pressed it against Lysandra's forehead. Closing her eyes, she remembered the feeling she had from when she made a contract with Een. Soon, the system notified her of the contract. Would you like to form a life-blood contract with Lysandra, light goddess's incarnation? Yes, no? Immediately tapping yes. All she needed to do was wait for Lysandra to accept as well. Stop! The goddess shouted out with rage as she swiped her hand. System interference detected. Violation of Code 94, B2E45. Time stop active. Waiting upon entity, Lysandra, to respond before continuing time flow. Widening her eyes in surprise, Shiro couldn't believe that the light goddess was actually able to affect the system. Holy sh**t. Looking around her, they could see the vengeful face of the goddess paused in time while Een was reaching out in an attempt to help. Taking a deep breath, Lysandra couldn't believe that a good goddess could make such a scary face. If I accept this, does this mean I can follow Teach? Lysandra asked as she looked Shiro in the eye. Yes, this is also the same contract I had with Een. Shiro smiled apologetically. During her time in this quest, she had found herself liking Lysandra's company. Not only that, the relationship between Een and Lysandra was quite nice as well. Smiling softly, Lysandra accepted the contract. Time resumed as a burst of light wrapped around both Shiro and Lysandra. Looking at the two, the goddess seethed with anger. How dare you mortals go against me? I'm a god, she hissed. Like father, like daughter. Shiro thought to herself after seeing the goddess forget all pretenses. Sticking up her middle finger, Shiro grinned as her body disappeared with Lysandra and Een. Arg! The light goddess shouted out in rage. Hashtag, 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 hashtag. After she was teleported out of the quest, Shiro could see Lysandra being wrapped in a cocoon of light. Due to the loss of qualification to be the light goddess's incarnation entity, Lysandra will gain a new class, Soulbound Archangel. Soulbound Archangel. Connected by the soul, this archangel will share the same level with the connected target. However, while this may mean that they can't level up by themselves, a portion of the EXP they earn will be funneled to the connected target and help them level up. Not only that, but a portion of the target's strength will be added onto the archangel. Looking at the system in surprise, Shiro was glad that Lysandra was no longer the incarnation, since this meant that she was free from the light goddess. Checking her own status board, she raised an eyebrow when she saw that she couldn't use any of Lysandra's skills. Strange. Shiro thought, but shook her head. Her main focus right now was the result of her quest. Quest, Ice Age. Main quest completion, A. Hidden quest, 3 tasks S. Hidden quest, Fallen God S. Hidden task, Kill the Demon King S. Due to conflict with Light Goddess, grade is decreased by 1 level. Overall grade, S-A. D ranked reward, Emergency Bag. C ranked reward, Divine Light Attunement. B ranked reward, Celestial Lotus. A ranked reward, Celestial Armament. S ranked reward. Due to conflict with Light Goddess, Divine Light Attunement is changed to Light Attunement. Although her conflict with the Light Goddess caused her a few problems, such as not being able to get the S-ranked reward, Shiro didn't mind that since she was able to get quite the haul from this quest. A new companion, level 60 set armor, and all of her class-up materials. This was just the most important rewards as well. It didn't include her rewards, such as the armor she gathered from the sheer amount of demons she killed. Before she could even check the description of the rewards she got from the quest itself, she was blinded by a sudden ray of light and noticed that she was back in the real world. Grabbing Lysandra and Een by the hand, she jumped into the rift and made her way out of the cave system where the dungeon was located. She wanted to make her way back to her room first. Checking the date, she saw that she still had a few days left till the recruitment demonstration. It should be enough time for me to buy the rest of the C-class mana stones that I need to class up, she thought with a smile. Arriving back in her room, Shiro laid Lysandra on the bed as she was currently asleep. It was unknown whether this was due to her changing class or not, but she knew that the best thing to do right now was just to let her sleep. As for Een, she looked around the room curiously. If you want, I can make you a small bed, Shiro offered since Een was currently in human form. Amen. I'll sleep with Mom. If anything, just make your bed a little bigger. Een smiled while looking in her closet. Smiling lightly, Shiro looked at her mana condenser that she had made a while ago and saw several sparkling mana crystals. Is that new snacks? Een asked eagerly as her eyes sparkled with joy. She could already feel the difference between a mana stone and a mana crystal due to the amount of mana stored inside. Sure, why not? Here. Shiro nodded her head and passed Een one of the C-classed mana crystals. Hee, thanks, Mom. Een grinned as she sat on the windowsill and started to nibble away at the crystal. Sitting down on her chair, she massaged her muscles lightly, since her body still hurt slightly from the backlash. Her vision was okay since it just meant wearing glasses for a few hours before it's fixed. Asterisk knock knock knock. Who is it? Shiro called out after hearing someone knock on her door. It's me, Natash. Hang on. Shiro replied as she hid the mana condenser. Passing Een the disguise orb that Natash had given her previously, she had Een hide her class. Come in. Opening the door, she welcomed Natash in her room. Care to introduce me? Natash smiled lightly after seeing Een and Lysandra. In, disobedient daughter, and someone who is basically my daughter. Shiro shrugged as she sat down on a chair. Wait, what? Natash widened her eyes in disbelief. Looking over at Een, she could see the resemblance. How old is Shiro? And her daughter looks quite old as well. When the hell did she give birth to her? She cried out in her mind. Who's the father? Natash asked as her smile twitched slightly. The father? No clue. What? I don't know who the father is. Shiro shrugged. Then what about the blonde girl on the bed? What do you mean when you said that she is basically your daughter? Natash asked. Think of her as adopted. All right. I'll inform my brother about your return and 2 new guests. If I'm correct, they should be living with you now, right? Natash asked. She wasn't anyone to judge Shiro's life choices. Perhaps she might even be older than she expected despite her body. She felt quite mature for a 13-year-old after all. Yes, please. Oh, also, is it possible for me to cancel out my mission to get the Ice King's crown? I'm going to spend the last few days to class up, so I won't go back to the dungeon. Of course. Since you're an elder, no credits will be deducted, don't worry. Natash smiled before leaving the room. Locking the door after Natash left, Shiro sat down at her desk and looked at her quest rewards. She was especially curious about the celestial armament. Pulling out her items, she laid them on the table. Emergency bag, celestial lotus, and celestial armament. Looking at the bag, the lotus, and the orb that sat on her desk, she could feel a large amount of divine energy from the items. Which one are you going to look at first, Mom? Een asked curiously. I know what the emergency bag is, so I'll have a look at the celestial lotus first. Shiro responded. Celestial lotus, red. The celestial lotus has connections with the lotus prince Neza from Eastern myths. The way to activate this is unknown, but one can feel an astounding amount of divine energy. Use unknown. Use unknown. Shiro muttered with a frown. Flexing her fingers, she created a laptop and searched up Neza. According to the web, the history of Neza ties in with Chinese gods. It is said that Neza was an extraordinary child that was more powerful than mortals. Unfortunately, due to the sins he had committed, the Dragon King wanted to flood his town. He didn't want the citizens to pay for what he did, so he ended his life as a tribute. Reading up to this point, Shiro was still confused as to why the lotus was connected to Neza. After he died, his master reconstructed his body using lotus roots. The F***CK? Shiro raised an eyebrow. After his reconstruction, Neza's master had awarded him with the wind-fire wheels, fire-tipped spear. In addition to this, he also had the red armillary sash which could bind the dragon prince and the cosmic ring that had incredible fighting power. Looking at the description for these 4 weapons, Shiro couldn't help but wonder what it was like to get one of them. Wind-fire wheels for speed, fire-tipped spear for attack, and depending on what happens, the cosmic ring and red armillary sash could be used for defense. An almost perfect all-rounder type warrior. Shiro muttered in interest. Is Mom interested in another baby? Isn't he just a plant? Een huffed as she too read the myth of Neza. Aren't you just a bird? Shiro retorted without looking at Een. URG. Ignoring Een, Shiro looked at her next item. The celestial armament. Celestial armament, red. An attunement augment that changes all of your elemental armors into element Celestial armament. Example being fire celestial armament. Activating the orb without hesitation, she watched as it melted into a ball of mist and flowed into her body. Feeling the foreign energy flow through her body, Shiro closed her eyes and calmed her mind. A short moment later, she reopened her eyes and smiled lightly. Incredible, Shiro muttered. She could clearly feel the difference in her armor now that it has been upgraded with celestial armament. Previously, it was like wearing a new set of equipment that gave her passive buffs. However, after upgrading, it was like a subclass. The power and elemental mana that she could control was upgraded to an entire new level. Suppressing her excitement, she looked at the emergency bag. This item would give her whatever she needed at this moment of time. Looking at the bag, she wondered if it will give her a 100% rebirth pill. As if. She chuckled but couldn't help but give the bag a second glance. Shaking her head, she decided to open it. Shielding her eyes from the light, she waited for a short moment before looking at the item that she received. Fusion Orb, Black. Will fuse two things together regardless of incompatibility. Black, great item. Shiro widened her eyes. But it's just fusing two things together? Why is it a black grade item? She muttered. Examining the orb, she knew that things weren't simple if it was graded black. Fuse two things, fuse two things. Wait a moment. She paused in realization. This item fuses two things together. It never states whether it was a weapon, armor, item, or concept. Shiro laughed as she turned to And raised an eyebrow while chewing the mana crystal. The hell do you mean, and? Shiro rolled her eyes. Since it can fuse anything together, it means that the possibilities are endless. Shiro grinned. Storing the item away in her inventory carefully, she was going to wait till she was higher tier before using it. At that moment, she'll be able to reap the most benefits out of the item. Sorting out the rest of the items, she recycled what she could and set aside what she didn't need. Once she was done with going through the quest rewards, she pulled out the Phoenix Rebirth pill that Nantion had given her. The pill, while weakened, gave her 2% rebirth. After consuming this, her body would have undergone 7% rebirth. Ingesting the pill, Shiro was surprised at how painless it was. Wasn't this supposed to hurt? She muttered. While she did feel like her body was heating up, it was more of a comfy feeling rather than painful. This baby's a phoenix with dark star element. As if a weakened phoenix pill would hurt Mom. Rolled her eyes. Is that so? Shiro raised an eyebrow. Allowing the pain to slowly fade away, she took this chance to double-check everything else she needed to do before classing up. She didn't know how long she needed to class up since took quite a while to class up after all. It would be awkward if she left things undone. Once the pain faded away, she sat down where mana is most concentrated. All of her class-up requirements have been fulfilled. As for the mana stones, she was able to collect enough of it from the monsters they killed in the raid. Mentally preparing herself, she looked at her system and tapped yes for the class-up. Asterisk, boom. Mana burst out of her mana realm as if a limiter had just been opened. From her body, 6 wisps of light floated around her. Each had a different color to represent their element. Hidden class-up options discovered. Materials needed. Tier 3 attunements in 6 elements. 1k C-classed mana stones. C-ranked raid completion with more than 30% contribution. Enhanced Fairy Element Core. Corrupted Demon King Core. Celestial Lotus. Fusion Orb. Due to the presence of the Fusion Orb, celestial power is fused with corrupted power. Ancient Mythical Class discovered. Congratulations, host, for discovering an SSS-ranked class. Mystic Sylph Queen. Mystic Sylph Queen acquired. Undergoing race change. You've got to be kidding me. Shiro widened her eyes, seeing her black grade item consumed just like that. No wonder I got it from the emergency bag, she thought before blacking out. While she was unconscious, the 6 wisps of light split apart into tiny fibers that wrapped her in a cocoon. Watched with interest as this meant more snacks for her. Powerful Shiro equals killing strong monsters. Killing strong monsters equals high-grade mana stone lollipops. Suddenly, an overwhelming pressure enveloped the entire room as more motes of light appeared. From Yin's perspective, each of the lights were tiny fairies that flew towards Shiro. URG. Oh the hell. Lysandra cried out, suddenly feeling a pressure crash down on her. Elise, you're awake. Een, where's Teach? Lysandra rubbed her head in pain. In the cocoon. Mum's undergoing a class up right now. Een replied, pointing at the cocoon. Is that so? Damn, I shouldn't be surprised, but what the hell is this pressure? I never thought that a single class up would give off this much pressure, Lysandra said while stretching her body. Well, it's Mum after all. By the way, welcome to Mum's world. Een smiled. What do you mean? Lysandra tilted her head. You see, spending the next few moments to inform Lysandra of where she is, Een watched as Lysandra struggles slightly with digesting this information. But that's not important. Een shook her head. That's pretty important. I've literally crossed worlds, you know. Didn't the light goddess say that only tier 7s can do that? Lysandra retorted. Yeah, but the bigger question is your role in the family. Mum's got me as a daughter and Kane as a little sister, so my aunt. Een said seriously. My role? Aren't I just teacher's student? Lysandra tilted her head cluelessly. Well, you're family now, aren't you? Therefore, you must have a role. Earlier, Mum did introduce you as an adopted daughter to her friend, so you're technically my little sister. No calling Mum Teach from now on, okay? But, Lysandra blushed, feeling a little embarrassed at calling Shiro Mum. No, but, you have to call Mum Mum. As for me, you call me Big Sis Een. Een grinned. Struggling for a short moment, Lysandra nodded her head. Be Big Sis Een. Lysandra stuttered as her face flushed with embarrassment. Good. If anyone bullies you in the future, I'll burn them into a crisp. Een smiled. But aren't you the one who bullies me the most? Hashtag. Damn, little Lise. Are you telling me to kill myself? Een widened her eyes. Huh, what? When was that on the table? Just now. While Een and Lysandra were bonding as sisters, Shiro's class up caused a small commotion in the faction. Countless motes of light could be seen surging towards Shiro's room as it attracted everyone's attention. Nadash and her brother Talius looked towards Shiro's room with a surprised look. What kind of class has this kind of phenomenon? Talius asked in disbelief. I don't know, but it must be a pretty big one. Even though the rooms are sectioned off, I can still feel the outrageous mana coming from her room. Nadash said with a small smile. This also means that Shiro can be fully recognized as a guest elder. After this class up, she'll be a bona fide C-class adventurer. Even if she is only level 51, she'll be more than qualified, especially with this kind of reaction with a single class up. Nadash chuckled. Meanwhile, back in New York. Emin? Wait, what? Aram suddenly sat up straight, seeing her system notification. All of her class up requirements has been met, and she'll undergo her C-class rank up. What the hell? I don't remember befriending a monster. She muttered in suspicion. Furrowing her brows, she looked at the statue of the light hero that was recovered from the ruins in Kairosa. Could it be? While Shiro was unconscious, 2 days had passed outside. Both Een and Lysandra stayed in the room since it would be awkward to walk around the faction when no one knew who they were. Plus, they weren't the highest level here, so if they offended anyone, they knew that they would be in trouble. However, the fact that they stayed inside for 2 days also meant that they had no food to eat. Een was okay since she could eat mana stones, but Lysandra wasn't the same. Big Sis Een, you said that you were a phoenix, right? Yeah, what about it? So if you like, hypothetically ripped off a piece of your body and cooked it, would I get stat points from that? Also, since you're a phoenix, can't you just heal yourself back up? Lysandra asked as she laid on the bed. Did you ask me if you could eat me without consequences? Een raised an eyebrow. No, yes, maybe. Lysandra waved her hand. Do you want to go out? I can take you to the diners or something. Een grinned as she sat on the windowsill. But wouldn't we be troubling Mum if someone took a liking to Big Sis Yin's appearance? Plus, just look at my wings. I can't exactly disguise myself, can I? Lysandra raised an eyebrow. After 2 days of constantly calling Shiro as Mom, despite the fact that she couldn't respond right now, she had gotten used to it. In addition to this, she had noticed that she couldn't retract her wings. Previously, she was able to do this with ease, but now, they were there permanently. The initial embarrassment faded away as she accepted Shiro as her adoptive mother of sorts. That's true. Een nodded her head. Even if they could hide Lysandra's class, they can't exactly hide her angel wings on her back. URG, when is Mum going to come out? Een sighed as she looked out of the window in boredom. *CRRRR. Right now, I suppose. Lysandra smiled as she quickly sat up. Cracks started to appear around the cocoon as light filled the room. Asterisk cough cough asterisk goodness. It's like AF asterisk king mud spa in there. Disgusting. Shiro coughed as she broke the pieces of hardened cocoon away. Mom! Een cried out happily as she dashed up to Shiro and hugged her. MN, how long was I in the cocoon? Shiro smiled while looking out the window. About 2 days, Mom. Een replied. Damn, 2 days. Shiro raised an eyebrow. Oh crap, it's been 2 days. She cried out, realizing that Lysandra probably hadn't eaten anything for 2 days. Lisa, what do you want to eat? I'll take you somewhere now. Shiro said, looking over at Lysandra. Anything is fine, Mom. Lysandra said as she moved her gaze away from Shiro. Mom, Shiro thought. Meh, I already have one unfilial daughter. Having a filial one would balance things out. She smiled with a shrug. Pulling Lysandra in for a hug, Shiro couldn't help but realized that she seemed to have grown a little taller. Ohaya, I seem to have matured slightly. Seems like having a queen in the class really changes things. Shiro rubbed her chin with interest. However, when she looked down to check out her assets, she felt her heart shatter. It was like a tourist announcer calling out the attractions. Ladies and gentlemen, if you look down, you can see the barren wastelands. Completely flat and null of life. No, no, no. Hee hee, I must be hallucinating. Shiro chuckled as she quickly conjured up a mirror. Een quickly pulled Lysandra aside as she used the chair as a protective shield. Why did you pull me aside, big sissine? You'll see. Looking at her figure in the mirror, Shiro could already feel her anger increase. Pound dollar percent carat and pound. To hell with this. This queen wanted a slightly better bust, but you give me height. She cried out in annoyance. After classing up, most of her features stayed the same. Same ice-white hair and void black eyes. However, her face shape had become slightly more mature. She now looked like a slightly shorter than average 18-year-old. Just that her bust was now. Ahem. Even without her bust, her figure was alluring. If anything, one would just think that it was a shame. Frowning slightly, she calmed herself with some difficulty. At least I have the body of an adult now, she thought. Taking off her glasses, since she didn't need them anymore, she thawed the ice mirror. Shaking her head, she realized that the silver lining was that this is closer to her old body, and she could already feel her body control increase by leaps and bounds. No longer would she need to worry about not having adequate melee range due to her childlike arms. Flicking her wrist, she summoned her dress. Pulling up her face mask, Shiro turned back to her 2 daughters hiding in the corner. What? I'm not gonna eat you. She rolled her eyes. Oh, Mom, are you feeling okay? I thought you would, rage more at your body. Een asked curiously. She remembered that Shiro had always been annoyed at her bust. Now that it has literally disappeared, she would have thought that Shiro would make a bigger deal out of it. Oh no, don't get me wrong. I am still F** king livid at whoever decides the appearance of class change, but at least I got a more mature body now. Well, at least in some aspects. Plus, Lisa needs to get some food. Shiro shrugged. Right, but little Lisa can't hide her wings. Didn't she do it in the quest? She raised an eyebrow. I've already tried, but it seems to be permanent. Lysandra smiled awkwardly. Lisa, come here. Shiro gestured. Getting Lysandra to turn around, Shiro pressed her palm on her back and examined her body. MN, all right. Just follow the route I directed my mana. The reason why you could do it before was because you had so much mana, you could literally just flood your system and it'll retract itself. But since you've downgraded back to a level 51, you'll need to follow the proper route. She explained as Lysandra's wings soon disappeared. Huh, that was easier than I thought. Everything is easy if you know the way to solve it. Shiro shrugged. Take this, it's similar to a disguise orb. It'll hide your class, she said while passing Lysandra a necklace. Activating her own disguise skill, Shiro changed her class to Elemental Sage. This way, she could justify why she could use 6 elements. Walking out of her room with both Lysandra and Een following behind her, she started to walk towards the canteen. While she was doing this, she checked up on her updated stats and couldn't help but marvel at her growth. Name, Shiro. Race, Mystic Fae. Title, Shadow Empress. Proficient Monster, 231/500 humans killed. Fratricide, 1 woman battalion. creator of the Frozen Hell series. Incomplete. Ice Princess, creator of Style Azura's Path, Eternal Ice Maiden, Corrupted War Maiden. Level 51. Class Mystic Sylph Queen, Nanomancer. HP 921, 250/921, 250. MP 1959, 320/1, 959, 320. STR 7000 plus 100. VIT 6500 plus 200. INT 12500-13, 500 plus 750. AGI 9500 plus 450. Dex 7500 plus 100. Def 3500 plus 100. Equals title bonus. Unassigned points 1000-0. Attunements. Glacial, Tier 3, augmented with Eternal Ice. Lightning, Tier 3. Metal, Tier 3. Shadow, Tier 3, augmented with Calamity's Will. Dark Star, Tier 3. Light, Tier 3. Balance, $3,200,600,000 Equipment. Tap to display. Skills. Mystic Sylph Queen. Tier 3 Eternal Ice Magic. Tier 3 Lightning Magic. Tier 3 Metal Magic. Tier 3 Light Magic. Passive Regeneration. Blessed by Ice. Faded Snow Movement. Glacial Aura. Glacial Touch. Elemental Breath. Elemental Field Affinity. Fey Illusions. Element Shift. Celestial Element Wheels. Nanomancer. Nanotech Master Tier 3. Frozen Hell Series. Frozen Slumber. Azure Hell Fire. Calamity Trident. Ice Drake's Feast. Ice Palace. Ice Demon's Calamitous Domain. Calamity Dragon Arrow. Ancient Healing Arts. Fire of Life. Style Azura's Path. Phantom Path. Azura Sword Path. Celestial Path. Sword Skills. Refraction. Soul Sword. Other. Mini-map. Inspection. Disguise. Mana Barrier. Combust. Heavenly Constellation. Aurora. Celestial Armament. Shared Skills. Dark Star Empowerment. Tier 3. Ice Chain. Tier 3. Shadow Cloak. Tier 3. Rift Walker. Tier 3. Shadow Affinity. Tier 3. Dark Star Affinity. Dark Star Seraphim. Tier 3. Looking at her overall status board, Shiro was slightly overwhelmed. Damn, I've accumulated quite a few skills. At least the systems compiled a few of them together into one. She thought after seeing Nanotech Master Tier 3. One of the biggest changes her class up brought her was definitely her attributes. Not only did her points increase massively, but her passive titles had also doubled their efficiency. She had also gained new skills that came with her new class. However, just looking at her status board allowed her to find the skills that were given due to the Celestial Lotus that she used for her class up. Celestial Element Wheels and Celestial Path. The first skill needed to be activated with Element Shift since it would allow her to summon Nez's Wind-Fire Wheels to increase her speed in combat. But, unlike Nez's Wind-Fire Wheels, she could change it to any element she wanted, and it would have a different passive. Ice would freeze, lightning would paralyze, shadow would increase her stealth, and so on. While she did understand why she got the Celestial Element Wheels, she didn't know how or why it had given her a new path to her martial arts. The Celestial Path was specifically designed to counter magic-based enemies. It included a specific way of using her mana so that it would cancel out against the enemy's mana. While this does disable her enemy, it also disables her from using mana, meaning she could only rely on hand-to-hand combat, and that's where her other two paths would shine. One class up and so many things to keep notes on. Shiro muttered with a soft smile. Despite how many upgrades she got, it was just the beginning. C-Class was from level 51 to 100. Every 10 levels, she'll get a new skill or two. Since her class was SSS ranked, the same as Nanomancer, she can guess that every new skill was going to be amazing. In addition to this, her class up didn't only affect her body. It also affected her sword since it had officially upgraded to red grade. Not only did its stats improve substantially, but it now also had a total of 7 swords and an element shift for every element she could use. If she was to fight the Demon King again, she was sure that she could kill him without relying on one of her power-up items. But there was no point wondering about the if, since she had already completed the quest and got her rewards. She also managed to piss off a light goddess during all of that. Thinking about the light goddess, Shiro wondered about how she managed to interfere with the system. I never expected the B*TCH goddess to be able to influence the system. How peculiar, she thought to herself. Arriving at the canteen, Shiro walked up to the counter and ordered some food for Lysandra. Her appearance caused a small commotion since they knew their elder was beautiful, but not to this extent. But when some of them looked down, they couldn't help but shake their heads. If it wasn't for the fact that Shiro was happy from classing up, she would have released her bloodthirst to make everyone go back to their business. Of course, neither Een nor Lysandra could be neglected since they were beauties as well. But when they saw Een, all of the disciples started to speculate about the relationship between her and Shiro. From what they know, their elder was very young and didn't have any record of having family members. Some thought that Een was her sister, while others thought that Een was her daughter. Naturally, Shiro understood their stares of curiosity, but ignored it. Showing her proof of identity, she only needed to wait for a short moment before she got a tray of food for Lysandra. Taking it to a table near the window, Shiro ignored the gazes while sneakily throwing a C-ranked mana stone into her mouth. Damn, no wonder Een loved to eat these. They're F***king addicting. She thought to herself. Mom, can we maybe eat back in our room? Lysandra whispered over. While she was used to the stares since she was a princess, being stared at by this many people was still uncomfortable. Learn from your big sis over there. Don't be shy from public scrutiny and don't pay attention to them. Shiro dismissed. Hearing Shiro praise her, Een beamed happily. Hee mum is praising me. Surely you'll indulge me with a few lollipops, right? Een asked with expectations written all over her face. Here, have some. Shiro nodded and gave her a few mana stone lollipops. While they were having some small talk, they ignored the commotion that Een had just caused. Jesus Christ. She's a mother? While Shiro watched Lysandra eat with a smile, she browsed the web to see if there had been any signs of the corrupted relic, Executioner's Requiem. Seems like the backlash hasn't hit yet. She thought after scanning through the forums. During her time in the quest, Varisha had been quite peaceful with no conflicts between factions. What are you looking at, Mom? Lysandra asked while swallowing a mouthful of food. Nothing much. Just some news about what's been happening. Shiro smiled while resting her chin on her palm. Looking at her two daughters eating happily, Shiro felt quite happy inside. If I was never experimented on, would I have a family like this? Shiro wondered curiously. Are you not going to eat? Lysandra asked. Me? The food is a little bland, so I'm fine. Shiro shook her head. Bland? I think it's pretty tasty. Here, give it a go, Lysandra said while offering a spoonful of food. Smiling wearily, Shiro nodded her head. Oh my! Widening her eyes, she noticed that she could taste the food now. Feeling the different flavors in her mouth, Shiro closed her eyes and savored the feeling. See? Good, right? Lysandra grinned. Yeah, it is. Maybe I should get more food. Shiro nodded. Looking at Shiro and Lysandra interacting happily, Een couldn't help but puff up her cheeks in jealousy. What? Do you also want something to eat? Shiro raised an eyebrow. No, you can eat with little Lys. Een turned her head away. Haha, little glutton, if you're jealous, just say so. Here. Shiro laughed softly and gave her a C-ranked mana crystal. While her stock was limited right now, more mana crystals were constantly being created in her room. Walking up to the counter once more, Shiro ordered some food for herself. As the three of them ate their food, they ignored the stares that they were receiving from the different disciples. Once they finished, Shiro prepared to go to the auction house. She needed to sell everything she got from the quest after all. Shiro, Natash called out from afar. Sup? Shiro smiled and gave her a small wave. However, when Natash saw Shiro's face, she paused in surprise. Wow, you've really matured. I bet there's going to be a huge line of suitors now, haha. She joked, but when she looked down, she noticed a certain runway and couldn't help but feel pity. What a shame. Doesn't matter. It's not like I'll accept them. Shiro shrugged. She decided to ignore the clear pity in Natash's eyes. If you don't mind, why don't we hang out for a bit? Natash smiled. Sure, but I need to go to the auction house first. Oh, you want to buy something? Nope. I got quite a few items from the quest, so I want to sell them. No use for them rotting in my storage after all. Shiro shrugged. You know that you can sell them to the faction, right? We have our own faction store that people can use. Nadash reminded. We can. Shiro raised an eyebrow. Well, yeah. We don't want to strengthen the other factions after all. Plus, you'll be able to get some contribution points whenever you sell things to the faction. Follow me. I'll take you to the transactions room. Natash said while gesturing for Shiro to follow her. Welp, you heard her. Come on, you two. Shiro called out to Lysandra and Ian. Coming, they both replied in sync. Well, aren't they cute? It's a shame that they aren't babies, otherwise they can become the faction's mascots. Natash said while looking at the duo. Of course, I'm not saying that they can't be mascots now. She shrugged. If Ian became a mascot, I'll be surprised. The little glutton would probably eat the pantry of a faction if she could. Shiro smiled lightly. I can hear you, Mom. Ian frowned. I know you can. I'm making you self-conscious so that you would stop being a glutton. Shiro replied while giving Ian a side glance. Taking a deep breath in anger, Yin's face became flushed. Ha ha ha, chill out. Shiro grinned while poking Yin's nose and conjured up a handful of snow on her face. Gah! Ian cried out in shock. Bully. Looking at the duo's shenanigans, Lysandra smiled happily. She enjoyed this kind of atmosphere. Arriving at the transactions room, Natash gestured for the three to sit down on the sofa. So can you show me what items you got? Sure. We'll start with the least important ones, I suppose. Shiro nodded. Flicking her wrist, a table full of materials appeared with some even falling off the table. Hey, that's quite a haul you have there. Natash smiled. From the table full of materials, she noticed that most of them were dropped from demons. She knew that the quest received from the dungeon involved demons, but she had never seen anyone return with so many materials. Plus, a person can only do the quest once. This meant that Shiro had gathered everything in one go. What grade did you even get at the end of the quest? Natash asked curiously. Higher than AD. Shiro smiled. I expected as much. But I have to say, I'm quite surprised. A few people have tried to fight the army of demons, but died every time. How did you do it? If the way to complete the quest is known, we'll be able to get bountiful rewards. Natash asked. Honestly, I don't think that they can do it. Even I'm surprised at how I managed to muddle my way through. Just stick with the bag rewards. There are better places to farm for materials. Shiro replied. She was being half-truthful since she did indeed muddle her way through a few situations. If the same situation was given to random disciples, she estimated that they had a 95% chance of failing. I suppose so. We were fine without farming the quest anyways. Natash shrugged. She had thrown the question out since it would be an added bonus for the faction. After going through the materials, she wrote down the estimated worth on a tablet and sent a document to the finance team. Shall I bring out the weapon and armor now? Shiro asked with a small smile. Of course, I'll just put these aside for now. Natash nodded and shifted the table across before pulling out a new table from her inventory. Asterisk clang 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 clang. A giant mound of armor and weapons appeared on the table as each of the armor pieces were on average level 50 equipment. From what she could see, Natash could tell that quite a few of the armor pieces were around level 70 as well. Didn't she class up after leaving the quest? How the hell did she kill level 70 C-class monsters? She thought in disbelief. Once a monster reached C-class, the difference between levels increase by a wide margin. For a level 50 to kill a level 55 is counted as a genius. What do you call someone who killed something 20 levels above them? What she didn't know was that compared to the average adventurer, Shiro has had a lifetime worth of experiences to back her up along with countless top-tier weaponry stored in her mind. Pair that up with her passive skills, augments, and titles, it made for one of the most, if not the most powerful level 50 of all time. While Natash went through the armor that Shiro wanted to sell, she couldn't help but ask if she was sure, to which Shiro always nodded her head since they were worthless to her. She already recycled the skills that she needed. She now needed to save up money so that she could prepare to buy more rebirth pills. Damn, what the hell happened in the quest? Did you kill their entire race or something? Natash asked after going through the last weapon. MN, well close haha. Shiro chuckled. Are you ready for the more important items now? She asked with a grin. Hashtag 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 hashtag. Aren't these important enough already? Natash felt the corner of her mouth twist when she heard what Shiro had just said. Each of the armor sets and weapons that Shiro wanted to sell could be classed as high-class commodities. Unlike the mass-produced weapons and armor that were somewhat subpar, every single armor was special in its own way and far superior than mass-produced crap. If all of these items surfaced in the market, there was no doubt that she'll break the value of certain items. And yet, Shiro mentioned that she had better items to sell. Sighing heavily, Nadash leaned back for a moment before sitting up straight again. Okay, I've prepared myself. I'm ready for anything you throw at me, Nadash said confidently. No, you're not. I said the same thing when I trained with Mum, and goodness was I mistaken. Lysandra muttered quietly as her body couldn't help but shiver a little from her memories. Hearing what Nadash had said, Shiro curved her lips into a smile. Snapping her fingers, several plates appeared in front of her. Here you go, Shiro said, while handing her all of the humiliation items that she had collected so far. Of course, she kept one of each to serve as trophies. Oh my, look at the grade and the EFF. The F*CK? Nadash paused seeing the description. Quickly grabbing another piece, she felt her eyelid twitch. What the F*CK did you do to the monsters? Also, why did one of them enjoy it? Nadash suppressed her urge to flip the table. Shiro. Sup? What did you do to the monsters for these items to drop? Pierce their ass. Shiro replied nonchalantly while checking her nail. Asterisk clang. Dropping the item in shock, Nadash stared at Shiro in disbelief. Meanwhile, Een and Lysandra looked away in shame. What? It's a good weak point. Shiro raised an eyebrow seeing everyone turn away. It's a good weak point, but it's also a shameful weak point, Nadash replied. And between targeting the rectum to live or avoiding it and die, which one would you choose? Shiro asked as she crossed her legs and stared at Nadash intently. Asterisk cough asterisk anyways. I think that these items will benefit the faction greatly. And is this all the humiliation type items that you have? Nadash asked with some difficulty. She had to admit that for such a good defensive type item, she didn't mind targeting an ass or two. It was just a shame that she wouldn't be able to use it since the description clearly barred Shiro from using them, as she is the culprit. However, there was also another problem with getting this kind of item. The monster would definitely become berserk, so it was best that they get high-level disciples. But at the same time, the high-level disciples wouldn't waste their time for something like this, especially since they can't use it themselves. They had better things to do. Of course I can get more. Shiro grinned. That being said, how about we make a small deal? For every let's say 10 humiliation item I give to the faction, the resources I receive, including what my friends receive, gets an overall increase. How's that? Shiro asked with a smile. I'll have to ask. Nadash replied after a short moment since she knows about the deal that Shiro had with the faction. In exchange for being a guest elder, the faction would nurture her friends as best they could. Sure. Shiro smiled and sat back. She had plenty of time to wait for Nadash to ask for permission. After waiting for a while, Nadash received a message back accepting the terms. Okay, they said that's no problem. For every 10 humiliation items you give us, we'll increase your resources slightly. They said that they're only raising it slightly since you seem to be able to get these items quite easily considering the fact that there are more than 40 here already. Nadash smiled apologetically. How about 5 items instead? After all, each of these are high-ranked defensive items. Shiro smiled lightly. Nadash understood her underlying tone since she had the option to sell this to other factions as well. Putting a new request in, Nadash soon smiled and nodded at Shiro. They've agreed. Great. Now since there is more than 40 here, I'll just count it as 40 for now as discount. Shiro smiled. So how much is that in total? Shiro asked. The items, armor and weapons combined is more than 20 billion US dollars. Ever heard of a currency known as Aaron? Nadash asked. Yes, I have. 1 billion US dollars is 1 bronze Aaron, right? Yeah. It's slightly awkward to work with USD for now, so we'll pay you in Aaron. In total, that'll be 24 bronze Aaron coins. Oh, but before that, I also have 3 billion on me right now, so can I trade them in for 3 bronze Aarons? Shiro asked while they were on the topic of money. Of course. After transferring the money over to Nadash, Shiro received a total of 27 Aarons. In addition to this, Her system interface had also upgraded to now show 27 bronze errands and 200.6 million US dollars. Just as she was about to leave with Ian and Lysandra, Nadash called out to her. Remember that in 3 days' time, the recruit demonstration is being hosted. Make sure that your schedule is clear, okay? Of course, don't worry. Shiro smiled. Leaving the room, Shiro started to plan her next 3 days out. If I remember correctly, there is a training room in this place. I can probably test out my current capabilities. Maybe even spar against Lysandra to improve her combat prowess. She thought while glancing back at Lysandra. Suddenly feeling a chill down her spine, Lysandra looked up and made eye contact with Shiro. Seeing that kind of look in her eyes, she knew what was up already. OSH*T.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe.